Andrew.
Hello. Today is Saturday, April 24th, and welcome to Skeptics and Seekers. I am not your usual host, so if you're here for the first time, thank you for tuning in and thank you for listening. If you've been here a little while and you realize I'm not the usual host, well, welcome back. If you're part of that third group who says, hey, what's Andrew doing? Hosting Skeptics and Seekers, let me recommend that you reconsider your life choices. You've been here far too long. Speaking of those folks who have made poor life choices, we've got a live chat room for this episode of Skeptics and Seekers. And if in the future you would like to join the show in the live chat, you can find Skeptics and Seekers at skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com, or you can send an email to skepticsandseekers@gmail.com. There are about 100 slots open in the live chat room for every show. And let me tell you, the first 4 slots go really fast, so you should sign up early. So today, we are here to discuss something quite serious. Today, if you've been following the blog and you've been following the discussion board, today we discuss abortion. And so let me go ahead and dive right into the introductions. Co-hosting with me today is someone who is entirely new to Skeptics and Seekers, and that is Clinton Wilcox. Clinton, hello.
Hello, Andrew. Thank you for inviting me on to participate in this discussion.
Thank you for being willing to join us. Discussing abortion today, taking the usual pro and con positions. We have a usual voice of Skeptics and Seekers back to join us, Darren Lute. Hey, Darren.
Hello.
Short and sweet, and taking the pro-life position. Someone who always acquits herself well on Skeptics and Seekers, Teddy Pappas. Hey, Teddy.
Hello, how are y'all?
Great. All right, so before we get into opening statements, the usual host of Skeptics and Seekers, who is running the control board behind the scenes today, David Johnson, has an opening statement, and we are going to go right into the discussion of abortion. David, unless you have some preliminaries other than your opening, the mic is over to you.
So if I do have preliminaries, you're going to take it away?
I should have already taken it away. I can see how this is going to go.
Should have never given me the mic. Because I have no responsibility in this show at all. My whole point of being here is to be in the chat and to wreck the conversation from behind the scenes. So that's going to be fun. I do have one preliminary before we jump into this very serious topic, which is a kind of a serious preliminary. So 2 people, Vic Rose was one of them, and the other, I think it was Susanna, I can't remember exactly, but 2 people this week have taken me to task for, or at least ask questions about the cover art for the blog that I've chosen, and excuse me, it's for this series that we're having, A Time to Kill. And so last week, this week, the next 2 or 3 weeks will be all on that subject. And that's going to be going on, if you want to go in and join the conversation, that's skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. And the cover art is very much not something that I usually do. It's a very gory image of a stoning or something like that anyway. And it's the type of thing that if one of the people on the board put in the comments, I would remove it. So sorry about the double standard, guys. The reason I chose that image, and I had to think long and hard before I did it, and trust me, there were much worse images that I could have chosen, just looking at images of stonings. There's some pretty graphic stuff out there. The reason I chose the image is because I think that we need a visceral slap in the face so that we understand what we're talking about over this next few weeks, because it's easy to purify it and make it very antiseptic. But it's not. The introduction that we had last week was not. The subject that we're going to talk about this week is not. It's very graphic. And I think that there are times when a graphic depiction of what's being discussed is necessary. And so I dropped a bit in the comments. I don't want to read it myself because I don't like reading out loud. And so would one of you sharp, eagle-eyed people read this? This is a passage from the Bible. I've got it in my write-up on the board, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. You can send me an email, skepticsandseekers@gmail.com, if you want to take me to task, but don't want to put it on the board. But would someone read that out loud so that I can kind of help justify my reason for putting it up there? Darren, Teddy,
Sure,
Brian. Okay,
I'll do
Darren.
it. Suppose your own full brother, your son, your daughter, your beloved wife, or your closest friend should seduce you secretly, encourage you to go and serve other gods that neither you nor your ancestors have previously known, the gods of the surrounding people, whether near you or far from you, from one end of the earth to the other. You must not give in to him or even listen to him. Do not feel sympathy for him or spare him or cover up for him. Instead, you must kill him without fail. Your own hand must be the first to strike him, and then the hands of the whole community.
So we read passages like that, and when they're just words, we've become immune to them. And I wanted to show, at least graphically, what we're talking about, what it is God was ordering that you do to your kid or to your wife or your best friend. That's what we're talking about. That's what's at stake here. And I don't want that to be lost. I'm not going to post graphic images of abortion. Trust me, I thought about it. But there is an emotional argument to be made there too. And Christians make this type of argument all the time. I think somewhat inappropriately, but I understand that part of this is an emotional argument, and I don't want to suppress the emotional argument when it's the other side too. And so the other thing I've been taken to task for is simply criticizing the Christian position, which I find very easy to do, but not putting out a position of my own. And I've called people together to give their own positions about things. And I recognize that I have not yet given my own position. And so for the next few minutes, I'm going to give my own position, and then I'm going to mute myself. I warn you, though, that the position I'm about to give you, it's not something that I have said out loud. It's not something that's going to make me any friends. It's something that will anger both sides. So I don't mind standing alone, but there would have been a time when I would have considered this position risky enough so that I wouldn't say it publicly. So after giving it some thought, I want to make this case. If you want to say pro-choice, pro-life, I find that a very very bad dichotomy. I find it just marketing on both sides, and I don't like either suggestion. But if I had to choose one, I suppose you can label me with pro-choice. But let me be clear. The position I had as a Christian has not changed all that much. Okay. So on the board, I wrote a piece called "No Abortions, No Exceptions." And of course, being on the pro-choice side, obviously that has changed. But much of my rationalization has not. And I can tell you right now, I hate abortion. I despise abortion. I think that I think it's a dirty business. I think that many abortions are wrong. I don't, I don't like it at all, and I don't side with mothers who wait for a long period of time before having an abortion. Um, I don't appreciate them. Defending them to me feels like defending the tobacco industry. And there may be some defense that the tobacco industry could have, but I wouldn't want to be tasked with it. And I feel like that defending abortion. I despise abortion. The only thing I hate more than abortion is for unwanted children to actually be born. So let me unpack that just a little bit. I'll try to be brief. We know that I'm going to fail at that. Hierarchy of human value. The first thing is to understand my point of view about human life and human value. I am very much like Peter Singer in this regard. And in the same way that Peter Singer loses the emotional argument every time, I will lose the emotional argument. So I get that. But I don't believe that all people are created equally. I think that's bunk. It's a great thing for bumper stickers. But in the real world, we don't act like that. We don't think that. Nobody thinks that. In the real world, we all have a hierarchy of human value because we don't think that one life is actually the same as another life. And so I encourage you to engage in a thought experiment. If there is some type of disaster going on and you have the ability to save 10 people, let's say, if some of the people that need to be saved are people from your own nuclear family, don't lie, you will get them first. You will run over and past other people who need saving to get to your tribe. Because when it comes right down to it, they're at the top of the hierarchy of human value in your mind. And you can say all humans are equal, but you don't buy it. You don't really buy it. If we expand the experiment to thinking about nations, and only 2 nations could survive, say resources had gotten so low and we were faced with some type of decision. Don't worry too much about how we got there. It's a thought experiment. Only 2 nations could survive. Let's just assume the one you live in would be one of them, and then you could save another. And who do you save? Well, I don't know, but given the choice, say, between Europe and Africa, I'm going to save Europe. I'm going to save Europe. I'll do it every time. China and Africa. I'd probably save China. God help me. Russia and Africa. Finally, Africa, you win. I see no use for Russia at all. But it's a terrible experiment to put yourself through. But if you do, you will realize in the quiet of your own heart that you do have a type of hierarchy of human value. And it's just a matter of how you work that value out. For me, the value is based on what will that person do to forward the cause of social evolution? Will they forward the cause or will they hinder the cause? And for me, that's kind of the guiding principle to the hierarchy of human value when I think it through. Does this make me a monster? Probably. I wouldn't even argue that it doesn't, but this is just true. This is just how I think. The reason I go over this idea of the hierarchy of human value is because when it comes to the unborn, they are at the bottom of that hierarchy for me every time. They will never win out over any group. When it comes to a matter of choice, when it comes to the choice of a woman whose life will be wrecked by having a child, even if I think she's in the wrong, even if I think that she has behaved irresponsibly, even if I am furious at this woman, she will win out over the unborn every time. Because in the hierarchy of human value, she is higher for me. And so in the abortion argument, you just need to understand that I don't think of life the way Christians think of life. And I don't think of human value the way we like to speak of human value in bumper sticker type ways. This is just me. And when it comes down to that kind of choice, the born win over the unborn every time. Bad versus good abortions. The rest of this should be real easy, right? So I actually believe that not all abortions are created equally. So I say that I hate abortion. I think that abortion is a dirty business, but there is actually a type of abortion that I think is a good abortion. I think that when the abortion happens very, very quickly, within a few days, morning after pill, the week after pill, maybe the 3 weeks after pill, whatever. I think there is a place where abortion is just morally neutral. It doesn't, whatever the human fetus, zygote, clump of cells, fertilized egg is, I don't care about it. I have no emotional attachment to that assemblage of cells as a human being. Have your abortion then. Make your decision quickly. Have your abortion, move on with your life. The bad abortions are when the thing happens that makes the human life truly viable. And I will be perfectly honest with you. I don't know where that is. It could be at the point where brainwaves happen. Vic Ruiz suggested that on the board. He could be right. It could be at the point of spinal cord insertion. But there is a point when we're talking about something significantly more than what there is in the beginning. And I think abortion at that point, it qualifies in my category of bad abortions. And I want to see fewer of those. I would love to see those eliminated. That is not to say that I want to make it illegal, but it is important that you understand that there is a difference for me between good abortions and bad abortions. Now, what can we do? Before we get to the what can we do, I want to lay out what I think the problem is. What creates the abortion problem in the first place? Now, forgive me, some of what follows might be incendiary, as if what you've heard hasn't been. I think that Christians are part of the problem, and the Christian idea makes abortion worse. So here's where I think that Christians have been a part of the problem and actually make it worse. So 70%. This is a statistic. You can see it in the sources that I've included in my write-up. 70% of women who get abortions identify as Christians. So whatever it is Christians are doing and teaching about abortions, it's not working. It's not working. I think that women take longer to decide to get abortions because of fear of Christian backlash. So some of what I would call the bad abortions happen because Christians, they don't feel like they can go in and get it done when they go to churches. And this is borne out by statistics too. I don't have time to cite everything, but when they go to their churches or church members and talk about abortion, they usually get retribution and judgment and condemnation. And so they don't do it. And it gets put off. And eventually they decide to get the abortion anyway, but it's after the term is much longer than it needs to be. And then the churches that are against proper birth control, which, all of the Catholic Church, and I think when it comes right down to it, most of the mainstream Christians too, if you ask them, they don't believe that young men and women should be using birth control outside of marriage. Well, guess what? A lot of abortions happen due to sex that happens outside of marriage. And so if better sex education, better birth control was a part of the equation, I think that we could actually eliminate abortion. So finally, what can we do to eliminate abortions? I've set all of this up, and so you can probably guess what's coming. First of all, somewhat unintuitively, if we want to reduce abortions, make abortion more available as a viable option to more people so that they can get the abortion early. So this is one of the things that'll eliminate or reduce what I call the bad abortions. It just needs to be a viable option up front. But moving further than that, we need better sex education. And anyone who teaches abstinence only should not be allowed to teach kids anything about sex education, because that's just a failed experiment that ignores the human condition. Thirdly, condoms, birth control should be free for everybody, teens and adults, everybody, because sex is going to happen. And in fact, maybe more sex would happen. And that frightens Christians to death. But while more sex might happen, I'm not sure more sex would happen because it's happening anyway, fewer pregnancies would happen. Fewer pregnancies lead to fewer abortions. And then finally, science can get even more involved so that things like the morning after pill can be even more effective, and even with longer periods of time, because you don't always know that you're pregnant the morning after. So I think that all of these things taken together would not only reduce bad abortions, they would reduce abortions altogether. But a lot of this stems from how we view and treat human sexuality. So just a moment to plug, after this series on killing is over, we're going to pick up this thread and we're going to spend a few weeks talking about human sexuality. So that said, I have only one more thing to add to the abortion conversation, and I will do that at the end of the show in the form of a piece of music. And so with that, I am going to mute my mic and turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you, David. I think that covers a lot of the ground for what we will cover today. And if you folks have things to say in the chat, by all means, alert us in the chat. And if there's something worth reading out, as usual, here on SNS, one of the moderators will bring it to the front. I will simply ask, before we get into opening statements, and without getting into the position that I hold on abortion, I will ask that even though you probably have a lot of emotion wrapped up when you listen to this show, whichever side of the line you're on, whether you believe in choice or you're pro-life, whatever you are, because we know that we have these emotional responses, I will ask and suggest that this is one of the most important times you could possibly apply the notion of philosophical charity. Demonizing the other side, going in with your answer already decided, is not a way to hear this conversation. And I'll also say that you should listen and realize that the pro-life movement and the pro-choice movement, they're not opposite poles in the way that this topic has been politicized. I think that both sides have good in mind. And so again, without getting into my view on the topic, which will certainly come out in the unfolding of this show, listen with your best intent. Listen with your best intent. Teddy, if you don't mind, you are well practiced in opening statements. Would you mind delivering your opening first? Are you prepared for that?
Well, it's going to
Actually,
be contemporaneous.
I have a quick question, if I could.
Please.
Okay, so so you said that the moderators will get a chance to do an opening statement as well, right?
Oh, yes, and I'm sorry, you're right. You have that option right now if you would like it.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, let me go ahead and do mine right now, just because I'm not one of the, one of the debaters who's here to actually debate the position. So I'll kind of just say my piece and then just let the, the two debaters kind of take off with it. If that's all right, Teddy, I don't mean to cut you off. Okay. So is that okay with you, Andrew?
Oh, yeah, of course, please. Thank you for alerting me to the break-in protocol.
Oh yeah, no worries, no worries. Okay, so I just have a little brief opening statement I would like to give. I didn't actually have one prepared. It was actually kind of a last minute thing for me to join the podcast here. But before I give a brief opening statement, I wanted to respond to a couple of the things that David said in his position, because if I don't, it's unfortunately going to end up poisoning the well against the pro-life position, based on some of the things that David said. It's already going to prime any of the pro-choice listeners against the pro-life view because of some of those things. And so one of the mistakes that David was making in his statement, and this is actually a common mistake in the abortion issue. There are actually a lot of mistakes in that a lot of the nuances of the view or of the discussion are ignored. And one of those nuances happens to be the difference in value. So David was saying that that there's like a hierarchy of human value, and that even pro-life people have a hierarchy, that no one actually believes in human equality. And I just want to say that that's absolutely false. I'm not sure why David thinks he can psychoanalyze the pro-life movement as a whole, or pro-life people as a whole. But one of the mistakes he's making is the difference between intrinsic value and instrumental value. Intrinsic value is a value that something has within itself. So not even talking about people, things like beauty is intrinsically valuable. It's something that's worth pursuing for its own sake, not to get us anything else. And so human beings, according to the pro-life position, are intrinsically valuable. They are valuable in and of themselves. They're worth pursuing for their own sake, not to get them something else. In fact, if you treat a human being as merely a means to an end, pro-life people would say that's immoral. You can get that from a Kantian position. You can also get that from an Aristotelian position of human value. So there's a difference in types of value. So when we say that all human beings are intrinsically valuable, that means that we believe that all of them have equal rights, and that we have an obligation to treat people in a specific way. Now, does that mean that if two people are in mortal danger, like a burning IVF clinic, like David alluded to, that I have to necessarily go for a higher number of persons because I hold human equality? Well, no, that doesn't follow, because there might be instrumental reasons that I choose the one over the many. So this type of discussion regarding value, we need to keep in mind the actual distinctions between types of value: instrumental value and intrinsic value. But also, and I say this next part because I don't want to offend David, but I do hope that he will reconsider his view on human value, because David's position on human value is actually pretty scary. And the reason for that is because that's how we got chattel slavery in America, the Tuskegee experiments. That's how we got the Holocaust. That's how we got the Cambodian genocide, is because these dictators had a hierarchy of human value. Adolf Hitler believed that the Aryan race had value over Jews and homosexuals and gypsies and other undesirables. So he believed it was his moral right to kill those people. White Americans in the South believed that there was a hierarchy of human value, that white people had more value over Black people, so they had the moral right to enslave them. So the modern type of people that are devalued are the unborn. So this is the same type of argument that got us the Holocaust and that got us the Tuskegee experiments and chattel slavery. So this idea of a hierarchy of human value is actually really scary. And I hope David will reconsider considering that all human beings have equal value instead of this hierarchy of human value, because it's how we've gotten so many human atrocities in the past, was because of this idea of human value. So when we look at when we look at the issue itself, we know that science has shown that human life begins at fertilization. Embryologists discovered that in the mid 1800s, that human life begins at fertilization. And then pro-life people also make the case that if human life begins at fertilization and our rights are intrinsic to us, that is, that they're not granted by the government, but they are recognized by humans, and we have an obligation to respect the rights of others. The only way to make sense of this view of human equality is if human rights inhere in us by nature, not that they're granted to us by government. Because again, if the government can grant rights, that means that they can take them away at any point. That means that we could always return to enslaving Black people, or we could always return to some other human rights atrocity. The only way to make sense of the fact that it's wrong to do those things, even when it was wrong, is the idea that there are human rights, and that those human rights are there regardless of our view of human value or of human rights. So we have an obligation to treat human beings in a certain way, whether or not we have an emotional attachment to them. You know, I have an emotional attachment to members of my family, one that might not be there to a complete stranger. You know, I don't feel an emotional attachment necessarily to a homeless person who's begging for money on the street. But does that mean then that I'm justified in killing that person, or even that I'm justified in just walking by without giving him a second glance, or excuse me, without trying to meet some need that he has? That lack of emotional attachment is not an indicator of how I am able to, or of how I am supposed to treat that person. So if the unborn are human beings, or biological human beings, which they are, we know that through scientific discovery, then we have an obligation to treat those human beings in a certain way. And so we have an obligation to respect the right to life of those human beings, even though we don't have any sort of emotional attachment to them, while we might have an emotional attachment to the pregnant woman. Because often our emotional attachments can actually lead us astray and cause us to do the wrong thing. We might be well-meaning in doing the wrong thing, but we're still doing the wrong thing. So we can't let our emotional attachments be a guide as to how to treat a certain subsection of human beings ethically.
Okay, so I am sure that we are going to get into full moral status. This is what the part of what you were saying, Clinton, is what the philosophical literature describes as full moral status. I'm sure that in the course of the debate, we're going to get into full moral status. And I'll ask just for the listeners to consider whether there's a slippery slope fallacy in what you've said there, and ask Teddy to deliver her opening statement if she's ready.
Yes. So one of the things that we hear constantly in our society today is this concept of inclusiveness. And that is an important thing. We want people to feel a part of society. We don't like the idea of people being left out. And so that's a good thing. And especially when we look back at our history and we see how there were segments of the population. We look back at how people were brought from Africa and enslaved, and we saw the horrors of slavery, and we saw how we had our president, Abraham Lincoln, the only leader in this world who had fought a civil war in order to abolish the horror of the institution of slavery. That's the only time in world history where a civil war was fought to abolish that horrible institution. And from that, we would think that we would have learned from that the idea and lesson that you don't try to define someone out of their humanity. And what we try to do is we try to figure out what is the common denominator that all humans have. And that is their very humanity. And we figure out what is that makes us human, and that is our nature. And that is when, at the time of fertilization, when a sperm and an egg unite, and then you have that fertilization, and then life is created. And that is what we all have in common. And with that life, what you have is the sense, this infinite sense of possibilities. That is the most precious gift that anybody can be given. Life. And you know what? Everyone in the sound that can hear my voice, you know what? You value life. And you know how I know that? Because you can hear me. You haven't committed suicide. You were here. You can hear it. And so you value it. And maybe you complain about you don't like this or that, but you were here. You value it. For whatever reason, you are still here. And rightly so, because there's so much to value in life. And if you will just wait, and if times are tough, if you just wait, something will change. There are infinite possibilities. There are people that go through the darkest of times, and then you just wait. Things happen. We have free will. Things change. And so that is the beauty of life. And for people who do not believe in God, for atheists, that makes this life even more important, because to an atheist, you only have one life, this life here on earth. And so this gift of life, to have it stripped from someone, that's a crime. That's a crime. And we all have that right. And in the Declaration of Independence, you know, we are endowed with that. I mean, just, you know, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, what gives a woman, we keep talking about a woman's right to choose, a woman's right to bodily autonomy. I'm a woman. I want bodily autonomy, but do I have an absolute right to bodily autonomy? If I have an absolute right to bodily autonomy, that means that I can go and commit all sorts of crimes with my body. Can I commit child abuse with my fist? No, I don't have bodily autonomy in that sense. I have to do certain things that that conform to certain laws, moral laws, legal laws, societal laws. So we don't have absolute right to bodily autonomy. That's a farce. And just even morally, there's certain things, natural laws. There are certain things that nature imposes upon us. For example, getting old. Well, I don't know too many people that like the idea of becoming, really old. We prefer to, stay young. But you know what? Nature imposes that reality upon us. Nature imposes on women the reality of, once you get a certain age, certain things start happening to your body. And there are certain things where whether you have sex and you inadvertently get pregnant, or you have sex and you want to get pregnant, or you get raped and you get pregnant, the body is made to where you may get pregnant. And there are certain duties that occur where a woman, as a mother, has a duty to a child that is growing within the womb. And that duty is not the same as what just any random person owes to any other random person. There is a special duty that a mother owes to a child growing in her womb. And that is a sacred duty. And if an atheist is going to say that because they don't have a God, I don't think that there are very many atheists, at least not the ones that I know and that I have spoken to, that I think are going to say that they don't think that there is some sort of a special bond between a mother or a parent and their child. And if they do say that, then I think there's something wrong with them. That's a natural bond. We see that in animals, in the lowest of animals, where they protect their young. And so there are duties. And the people who can hear my voice, who have still chosen to live because they see the value of life and they know the value of life, you know what? They are still here. And they are even here because they reap the benefit of having a mother that did not kill them while they were in the womb. And they lucked out. They won the lottery. But what does it say about a person who says, you know what, I've got mine. I don't care about the people who don't get theirs. Is that inclusion? Is that what we call inclusion? I'm tired of these people. You know, talk is cheap. Put your money where your mouth is. You want inclusion? What about those babies that are losing their opportunity to enjoy this thing that we call life, the most precious gift that any of us can ever hope to have? Where combined with free will, there's just no telling what we can make of it. And are there joys and sorrows and everything else mixed up in between that are part of it? Yes. That's all part of life, but that's what makes it so wonderful. Without the darkness, you don't know what joy is. And so it's all part of it. But we don't have a right, just because a baby is not fully developed, we don't have a right to unnaturally thwart that development and say, oh, it's not capable of advanced thought yet. We can kill it. We can stick scissors in the back of its neck and do a late-term abortion and have half of its body hanging out and do that sort of, I mean, it's sick. And we call this a civil society? And these abortionists, how are they different from Joseph Mengele? And we think of ourselves, this is America and this is happening. And we are trying to pass laws against this, and the United States Supreme Court keeps knocking it down, and the legislative branch in this country has just completely they've taken their hands off, they've shirked their responsibility. And they are the branch of the government that is the closest to the people. And they have backed off. They are just cowards. And now the Supreme Court, they just sit there and they've become cowards too. At first, they were all the big dictators, the tyrants, seizing control, unelected and seizing control. And now they too are afraid, and they're about to get packed too and lose their power. But this society is going downhill quick, and the people that care about life, and you know what happens is at first it's always somebody else that's getting persecuted. It's always somebody else that's being treated as a subhuman. But then they start pointing at you. Eventually it gets to be you. And so we have to look again at the common denominator. What makes us human? It is our humanness. nature. And we don't say that who is valuable if they're smart, if they are capable of more sophisticated thoughts, how developed they are, how big they are, whether their heart has started beating yet. Will it start beating if you don't suck them out and dismember them before you let just a little bit of time pass so that their heart will start beating? Is it just a matter of time and development that is needed? That's all that's needed. So let's not make these false distinctions. Let's not say that, oh, we get to kill somebody just because we're gonna just beat them to the punch, in terms of we're not gonna let them develop, we're gonna rob them. If you've got some aunt that decides to send you a priceless Renoir in the mail, and then somebody steals it, and you had no idea that your aunt was going to send you this Renoir in the mail, and so someone steals it, you had no idea it was coming. Have you been robbed? Have you experienced a theft even though you didn't realize it was coming to you? Well, yes, you're a victim of a crime. You've had something stolen from you, even though you didn't realize it, because you were owed that. You were owed that priceless gift, and it was taken from you. And so you lost the enjoyment of it. You lost all that you could have done with that. But life, of course, is so much more. And if we want to call our society a civil society, I mean, what makes a society civil? Can we have a society be civil without fairness and justice? And is it fair and is it just to assign human rights to people based on some people trying to say, oh, well, that's not a person, and trying to use these legalistic terms to define somebody out of their humanity and out of their rights to exist? That's not fair. That's not just. And there can be no civility. There can be no goodness by those standards. And I don't think that when people really think about it, they're not thinking. They have fallen into this brainwashing of just these leftist talking points of it's your choice, this bodily autonomy business. And I was reading this article where this woman was talking about how horrific it was that in order for her to get a late-term abortion, she was having to travel to another state, and how we should just cry a river for her. And my jaw just about dropped. Cry her a river, because she had to travel to another state so that an abortion doctor can plunge scissors in the back of the skull of her baby, as half of the baby is going to be out of her body without anesthesia. Let's cry her a river. This is what's going on. And in terms of late-term abortions, most abortions do happen earlier on, but there's still late-term abortions going on in this country. And there's still 8 states in this country that have no limits whatsoever on late-term abortions. And there are still plenty of states in this country that permit them for, and some of them say for the health of the mother, which is a very, very loose standard, which can mean the psychological health. So if a woman says, oh, well, this is stressing me out, this pregnancy, well, oh, that's, causing her psychological stress. So, I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. This is not acceptable. This is not moral. This is not ethical. This is not good. And this is not civil. And it used to be said, and it was said, that America is great because America is good. But America has been losing its greatness. I don't like that. And I want it to be brought back to what it was. But the decline it's just stunning how rapid it is occurring.
Teddy, I'm going to ask you to pull this together and wrap up your openings so that Darren has an opportunity.
But anyway, we have to think about what is going on in terms of the most important fight that has to be fought is to preserve the rights of the unborn, because there's a Holocaust going on. There are over 71 million deaths that have occurred since 1973 until 2020. And that's a Holocaust. That's beyond a Holocaust. So we have to get out there and be serious about this and fight. And by fighting, that means voting people in that will make differences. Thank you.
Okay, Darren, your opening, take as much time as you need.
Okay, well, so I've had my position up on the board since Wednesday. And for those of you that's already read it, you can pretty much see that I predicted everything that Clinton and Teddy has said in their openings and described in detail why it doesn't even really matter. One of the things that I predicted was that Teddy wouldn't actually argue as if she believed heaven and hell were real places. And you saw that in her opening argument. So anyways, let me just sort of summarize what I went over, and then I guess we can go from there. So there's this concept in psychology about cognitive dissonance. It's where people hold two conflicting views at the same time, views that can't be true at the same, both be true at the same time. For the anti-abortionist, it's that we are taking away their life and yet they still go to heaven. So when a secularist talks about taking a life, they're talking about the actual cessation of all existence. Completely existence is gone. So when a secularist is talking about taking a life, they're actually talking about something different than the theist is talking about. For all of the Christian denominations I was able to find preparing for this, and I'm sure I didn't do a comprehensive view, but they either contended that anyone under the age of, I forget what they call it, consent? No, it's, anyways, where they're responsible for their actions, gets an automatic ticket to heaven. Some say that the ticket isn't guaranteed in their theology, but they trust in God's goodness that they would, anyone who doesn't have the option to, um, doesn't have the option to really take into consideration what the theology is, that God would go ahead and let them in anyways. So in the Christian theology, killing someone actually isn't really a cessation of their life. What it is just changing their perception from one life to another. So when a theist says that anti-abortionists are preventing people from having their right to life, they're not actually being completely accurate. What they're saying is that the right to life in that uterus has been taken away, and that the child will have to just settle for a life with God in heaven. So that is, one of those cognitive dissonances that theists have to deal with. They have this passion, and you heard it in Teddy's voice. She's very passionate about it. She very much believes that a life is being taken away. She's very emotional about it. And yet she also believes that the life isn't being taken away, because that baby will live in heaven with God. So if we are to take Teddy's position on this, and I happen to know that Teddy is very much a burn for all eternity type of Christian, where hell is a eternal torment, then what she's saying is she would rather see a person grow up and be condemned to hell, to be tortured for all eternity, rather than get a guaranteed ticket to heaven. And at first, it doesn't seem like that's what she's saying, but when you actually stop and think about how her theology works with the real world that we're living in, that is the only conclusion that you can come to from what her argument is. She's saying that she would rather take away that person's guaranteed trip to heaven and instead make it a very high possibility that they're going to be tortured for all eternity. And that's what the theist really has to contend with. I mean, there really is no moral argument that they can make about earthly rights or earthly right to life or anything like that, when heaven and hell is literally in the balance. And that's why I say that most Christians don't actually believe in their theology, because when they start arguing about abortions, about rights to life, they argue as if they don't actually believe heaven and hell exist. So that's the first hurdle that Teddy's going to have to get over today, is how does she square her passion for the fetus with her theology that she is, for every abortion she blocks, she is condemning, possibly condemning that baby to hell, to be tortured for all eternity. Another problem is that she says that the right to life is a divinely granted. I mean, I think it's great that she thinks that. I think if people thought of life that way, perhaps we'd have less wars in the world. Of course, the problem is that she can't actually demonstrate it's true. She can point to a Bible, but she can't demonstrate that the Bible is actually what she claims it is. She can point to basic beliefs or intuition or how she feels, but again, none of that's actually evidence that any of her supernatural claims are true. So that's another hurdle that she's going to have to manage today. How does she demonstrate that her claims to a divinely granted right to life are even relevant to the conversation? That's not even like the God in her Bible cared about life. I mean, genocides, he personally drowned the whole world according to the Bible. So, I mean, I'm assuming there were baby and unborn babies while he was doing that drowning. So God obviously doesn't care about the fetus as much as she does. And then she's going to have to deal with the fact that a lot of what she says is an emotional appeal, but it doesn't really address the actual problem. Both Clinton and Teddy, as you heard, say that there's no value ladder that David was talking about, and yet everything they talked about was a value ladder. Teddy specifically said that the unborn baby has more value than the rights that the mother has to her own body. That's part of the value ladder that David was talking about. Clinton was talking about equal rights, and yet I don't have the right to demand that someone else give up their body for me to survive. So they're not really talking about equal rights either, because if they were talking about equal rights, then the mother would have the right to control her own body, even if it meant the life of another person. And that's not what they're arguing for. They're arguing that the fetus has more rights to the woman's body than the woman does. And you can see that because they don't care about the woman's rights, or if they do, they value the fetus's rights more than the woman's rights. And they're valuing it for something that doesn't even happen the way they are projecting that it happens according to their theology. You know, the fetus may have a right to life, but does it really have a right to life in the uterus? What's wrong with a right to life in heaven? And I think I'll leave it for there, and we can continue on.
Okay, Darren, thank you. I think I want to start in a place where you left off and open this up for the room. And it's now time for much more back and forth. So Clinton, feel free. You were called out in Darren's opening, so feel free to chip in here. I certainly feel free to, because that's the Skeptics and Seekers contract. And I can see without being there that David's hand is hovering over the mute button. So here we go. Given that a woman doesn't want to get pregnant, and she takes some contraception, so she has not only said that she doesn't want children, but she has taken appropriate steps as far as she can tell, not to get pregnant. And maybe she even goes further. Maybe she even requires her male partner also to wear contraception. There's a limited number of cases where both contraceptive measures fail, and the woman still ends up pregnant. So the question for the room is this: given that that is an occasional case where both persons' contraceptive measures fail, but the woman has plainly stated through the use of taking contraception that she does not want a child, does she at that moment have a right to an abortion?
No, you don't get to kill somebody just because of a mishap.
Yeah, when you say you're opening the question to the room, does that mean that like anyone in the room can respond, or?
Yeah, I specifically called you out. Feel free to respond. Yes.
Okay, well, yeah, I would say, well, no, she doesn't have a right to an abortion because the act of sex is intrinsically linked toward having children. So if you have sex, even if you try to use contraception to avoid getting pregnant, you haven't changed the reproductive nature of sex. You've only added a barrier to procreation. So, if a person gets drunk and says, I can drive home, I'm feeling okay, but they hit someone with their car, they're still held accountable for reparations to the person they hit. They can't just make the argument, well, I consented to drink and drive, but I didn't consent to hit that pedestrian, so I'm not morally responsible for what happened to the pedestrian. Well, that's clearly not a good argument, because the pedestrian was harmed by a direct action that you took. You drank, lowering your inhibitions and your ability to make wise decisions, and then you drove in such a state. So you're responsible for reparations to that person. In the same way, since procreation is intrinsically linked to sex, if a man and woman have sex and the woman ends up pregnant, they have a responsibility to the child that they created, because they not only brought that child into existence, but they specifically placed that child in a state of dependence upon the woman. So she can't just say, I consented to have sex, but I didn't consent to getting pregnant, because pregnancy is a consequence of sex. You can't consent to consequences. You can only consent to the original act by which that consequence can obtain.
All right, so let me follow that question. Teddy, feel free to chip into both of these, but I think there's something that needs to be added here. So you're saying that every act of sex, no matter when it happens, is intrinsically linked to reproduction?
Intrinsically linked, yes. Now, obviously, not
You're
every
gonna have to
time.
peel that apart a little bit.
Now, obviously, not every time a couple has sex, they get pregnant, because there are certain things that have to go right. The woman has to be ovulating.
So it's not intrinsically linked every time.
Well, no, it's intrinsically linked, but just like smoking is intrinsically linked to getting lung cancer, not everyone who smokes gets lung cancer. But getting lung cancer is a direct result of smoking for your entire life.
That's a false
pregnancy-
equivalency.
Well, how is it a false equivalency?
I'll be glad to tell you.
Well, feel free.
If every-
I asked.
If every act of sex is not intrinsically linked to getting pregnant, and in fact, we know that it's not, because there are only 3 days a month or so during ovulation that women are likely to get pregnant.
173.
Okay, so
Wait,
then,
hold on. What'd you say, Darren? I'm sorry.
173. That's the average number of sex acts it takes to get pregnant.
but by
Okay,
definition,
so it's far less likely that you will get pregnant than you won't. I don't see the intrinsic link.
So how does that? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Teddy.
whichever day, but whichever, however the person got pregnant, clearly they got pregnant on one of those days. So they assumed the risk on that day that they weren't being careful in terms of when they had sex.
Wait a minute. That's not how I set this up. I specifically said that not only was she being careful, but she also required her partner to be careful. She has stated in as many ways as she can possibly state it that she does not want a child.
So how does it prove? So how does the fact that she can only get pregnant a few days out of the month prove that sex is not intrinsically linked to pregnancy?
Because you can have sex the other 27 days and they don't get pregnant.
Yeah, but that doesn't prove anything though, because on those 3 days that she gets pregnant,
but
she,
then
on
neither
those 3
is
days,
saying she
well, hold
can't
on,
get
just
pregnant 3
real quick.
days a month.
on those 3 days she got pregnant because she had sex. So sex is
And
intrinsically
on the
linked to
27 days
reproduction.
that she had sex and didn't get pregnant,
Yeah, but that
She didn't get
doesn't prove
pregnant.
anything. That doesn't prove anything though, because everything has to go right in order for the pregnancy
right?
to happen.
And it's much more likely that it doesn't.
But y'all are missing the big picture is that sex is risky business, in the sense that anytime somebody has sex, there is the assumption of the risk
No, there's not.
pregnancy. Well, yes,
No.
it is,
No,
because
there's not. The agreement to have sex is not an agreement to pregnancy.
There are countless women, from the beginning of time, who accidentally got pregnant and didn't want to. And
That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a woman who is taking birth control and requiring her partner
right.
also to take contraceptive measures.
And that's why it's risky, because sometimes contraception fails. So that it's not foolproof.
I think the
So-
problem
so
here
to
is that
hell with her
Andrew's talking
decision.
about consent and the other two are talking about biology.
That is exactly right.
Well, yeah, I responded to Andrew's argument from consent though, that because
Poorly.
sex is intrinsically, well, no, it wasn't poorly. This is just the reality.
yes, it
because
was
sex
poorly.
is intrinsically linked to
It absolutely is poorly.
because sex is intrinsically linked to procreation. When a
No,
woman
Yeah,
it's
but
not.
that doesn't matter.
she
That
anticipates.
has absolute zero.
Well, it does
It
matter.
does
Just-
absolutely zero to
Well,
to prove your point.
It does matter, and I use the example of
doesn't.
drunk driving to show why it matters. Andrew asserted without evidence that it's a false
Do you know what the
equivalency.
do you know what the
And I asked
definition
him,
of consent
and I
is?
asked him
Hold
why
on.
it was a false
What-
equivalency,
wait
and
a
he
minute.
didn't give an answer to that.
Just wait. what are you saying that I asserted without evidence?
That the
Let's not use phrases you don't understand.
well, I do understand the phrase assert. You know, I'm a, you know, I have studied logic, so I understand the terms that I'm using. If you disagree
Well,
with
it's a-
them, then maybe there's a disagreement there. But you know,
Well, get on with
so
it. What did I assert?
I used the analogy
About
from drunk
evidence.
driving, and then you said it's a false equivalency, and I asked how is it a false equivalency, and you just said, well, because sex is not
Oh,
intrinsically
well,
linked to
look, let me
procreation.
address you
And that's not
directly.
really
So what
that's not
happens
really
when
an answer to my
lesbians
question.
have sex?
Let me address your hypothetical directly.
Hmm.
If you drink and drive, and I happen to be on the road, and you hit me, my being on the road is not my agreement to you hitting me. And in fact, we have laws that will punish you because I wasn't giving my consent.
Okay, I
to you
think you
running me over.
misunderstood. I think you misunderstood my analogy.
Oh, I think you
didn't say-
misunderstand what consent means.
Well, no, I don't misunderstand what consent means.
Consent is
I'm
the permission
using-
for something to happen or agreement to do something.
Okay, but you can't consent to getting pregnant because getting pregnant is outside the woman's control.
Well, people
no,
do
you
consent to get
you can
pregnant.
take
That's what,
steps. You can take steps to avoid pregnancy, but
and you can take
whether or
steps to
not
get
Right.
pregnant.
well, yeah,
Which
you
is-
can, but getting pregnant is ultimately outside the woman's control because even if she has sex on days
Right,
when
but
she's
when-
ovulating, she
Right,
still
but when
might not
she's
get
trying to
pregnant
get
due to some other
pregnant,
factor.
she's giving consent to be pregnant when she's trying to get pregnant. If she's not
Well,
trying to
no-
get pregnant and she's actively trying to stay not pregnant,
Well, no,
consent is not something she's doing right there by definition.
well, no, but what I'm saying though is that you cannot consent to getting pregnant because getting pregnant is outside of the woman's control. You can take steps.
Yes, you can get, yes, you can. Okay,
no,
I'll
no,
leave
'cause
this to the audience.
even
All
if
the audience out there,
even if
do
all
you
the
think
stars
you can have,
align,
you can get
even if all
consent
the
to being
stars
pregnant?
align, she still might not get pregnant on the days that she's ovulating. It's still outside of her control.
It doesn't matter. Consent
Well, it
has
does
nothing to
matter.
do with biology.
Well, it does.
Consent is a
if we're
state of
talking about-
mind.
Well, no, because you can consent to have sex, but you can't consent to
Oh,
have
wait a minute,
pregnancy.
wait a minute. Are
Just
you
like you
actually
can, just like you
saying
can
that you
consent to play the lottery, but you can't consent
Clinton,
to winning the lottery. Winning the
Clinton,
lottery is outside of your control.
Clinton,
What?
are you saying that you can consent without an act of consent?
Is there more to your question, or
You can consent.
because I'm not sure your question makes sense. I mean,
Yeah, it makes sense.
You consent.
It-
You consent
The
by
fact that you don't
indicating
understand
your
it doesn't
assent.
mean that it doesn't make sense. Consent
Well, no.
is a thing. Let me finish.
So I
Consent is
think-
a consent.
I think
Let me
the-
finish, please. Second time,
Okay, well, stop.
or the third time,
Stop saying there are
or
things
the third
that I
time.
don't
let
understand
me
about
finish
this. We
the
might have a
question.
difference of opinion, but
You
I'm just
haven't
trying to
understood
lean
the
towards you
question,
here,
and in
so-
fact, you said you didn't understand the question.
Okay,
So if you'll stop and listen, I'll explain it to you.
okay, and okay, explain it.
Thank you. So, what is consent? When I say that I want to have sex, that would be an act of consent, or at least an act of desire.
Right.
If
because
someone's,
you're-
There might be a lag with you guys.
yeah, I'm trying to tell. If someone says that they want to have sex with me, and I say no, that is a lack of consent. Do we agree that far?
Yes.
Okay, if someone says that they want to have sex with me and I agree, that is consent. Do we agree that far?
Yes.
Okay, so then it is clear that my sex, whether I choose to have it or not, is something that I agree or disagree with. I have the right to say yes or no. And as far as I understand you, now, there is no situation in which I have sex and I have not offered one of those two, a yes or a no. So what I've tried to tell you and what Darren is telling you is consent is the state of mind about having sex. So what I said to you was, can you give consent without consent? Is there consent without consent?
Well, you worded it funny, which is why I didn't understand.
Do
what
you
were
understand
saying.
it now?
But yeah, in order to
Okay,
consent, you have to give your consent. But there are different forms of consent too. Like you can consent
No,
to
they're
something
not.
tacitly without your. Well, sure. For example, if you come into an operating room after having a major accident and you're unconscious, does the doctor have the right to operate on you? If there's no such thing as tacit consent, then no, a doctor could not operate on you. But the doctor operates under the assumption that you would say yes.
actually,
if
you
you
sign
were
forms these
unconscious.
days. There's-
Well, no, I'm just talking about like if you were in an accident, something you couldn't prepare for, something you couldn't foresee. If you come into a doctor's office,
So
or
are
into
you saying that
unconscious,
those who are, I don't understand.
so no, I'm just saying there are different ways you can consent too. You don't necessarily have to consent openly.
Well, the
with-
doctor
by actually
assuming
stating
consent is
yes or
not the
no.
same thing as you actually consenting.
Does the unconscious woman consent?
No, if we're talking about sex,
Okay,
then no.
then right.
But like I'm saying, there are other forms of consent too. So if a woman willingly has sex, she is tacitly consenting to the possibility of pregnancy,
No, she's
because
not.
pregnancy
No.
is a result of having sex.
No.
No, she's not.
Yes,
She is.
she is.
The definition of consent is permission for something to happen or agreement to do something.
It,
There's no such thing
And-
as tacit consent as you're
So
trying to
are
make
you
it out.
saying then? So are you saying then that the doctor does not have a right to operate on someone who comes into the ER unconscious and unable to give consent? The doctor does not have a right to operate on that person.
hey,
And
Dan,
it has nothing to do about rights right now.
Well,
We're
it
talking about
does. We're
consent
talking
because the
about
doctor does not
consent.
have consent in
Well,
what
no,
you're saying.
the doctor,
He has
a
assumed
doctor cannot
consent.
get into.
The doctor is
Well, no,
trying
and
to
that's what
save,
I'm
the
talking about
doctor is
here.
trying to
That's what I'm
save
talking
your
about
life.
here.
Yes, you're
That's what
not
I'm talking
comparing
about here.
apples to apples.
Tacit consent.
You're
I-
not comparing apples to apples.
I got a question for Darren and Andrew. When a man uses prophylactics and gets a woman pregnant, does he have to pay child support?
Again, we're not talking about the law at this point. We're talking about consent.
Okay, does he get his consent? If a man doesn't want to have a child, if a man doesn't give his consent to have a child, does he have to support that child? Does he have a moral duty to support the child? Does he have a legal duty to support the child? Should he have to support the child?
If the woman is getting pregnant against the man's consent, then I see no reason why the man should be held responsible for that.
And in fact, there have been,
My question
let
is,
me, I heard your question. Let me
happened,
answer
you
you.
can, oops.
I heard your question. Let me answer you. So we actually have cases like this. We have cases of entrapment where a woman will do something to a contraceptive to keep a guy in a relationship. These have played out in national headlines. And I don't know what the legal status
Legal,
is.
it doesn't
I-
matter.
I'm-
Money's owed to the
Teddy, I'm
child.
trying to answer you. Will you let me finish? I don't know what the legal status is, but ethically, I don't think he does have the obligation.
And it can be a reversed as well. If the woman does not want to be pregnant and the man does want to be pregnant, then the woman has no obligation to stay pregnant because she has not given her consent for anyone to use her body in a way that she does not approve of.
So let's get to the ethical implications of what you just said, Andrew. So by that father withholding child support, who is he hurting? Who is he getting back at? Like, hey, I'm not going to pay that woman for trying to trap me. But let's say that woman is poor and can't afford to feed her child very, very well. Who is suffering? Is it the woman, and maybe she's suffering too, but what about the child? And so actually legally, Child support, it doesn't matter what the woman did. And I
So she can be as unethical as she wants.
and I would condemn what that woman did. You know, don't get me wrong. I agree with you. I mean, I think that's just morally reprehensible. But child support is owed to the child because that father has a moral duty to help support the child. Both parents do. That's just a parental obligation, and a dad doesn't have to. It is because sex, that's, you know, procreation, and sex is an inherently risky business. And when two people have sex, there is the assumption of the risk that, you know, a baby may come about. And so
That doesn't matter.
yeah, it is. And that's
It
just,
only matters to you. It doesn't matter to anyone on the pro-life or the pro-choice side.
I'm
So if you're going to use that argument, it's going to fail.
that is not a reasonable position to take, that it is not an assumption of the risk that when you have sex,
Oh, but when,
pregnancy
okay,
may occur. That's not reasonable. I mean,
Well, you may claim it's not reasonable all you like, but that doesn't mean that anyone agrees with you.
because you know what? There are millions of women who have had sex, and it's like, oops, you know, so, you know, the proof's in the pudding.
Yeah, just because pro-choice people aren't convinced by it doesn't make it false. I mean, they could be
right, but-
digging their heels in and just saying, I'm
Right,
not convinced
but you're
because they
not
want
you're not
to guard.
presenting any reason we should think it's true.
Hold on. Okay, so
yeah,
I
he's
do
right.
wanna-
Let's
okay.
let's let Clinton and Teddy finish. That's
Yeah,
exactly
so
right.
yeah, so you know, you can just be digging in your heels and saying, I'm not going to agree with you because you want to guard intellectual turf. So it doesn't matter whether or not pro-choice people agree with us. What matters is the arguments being made. So if you're going to respond to our arguments, we need you to respond to the arguments, not just saying, well, pro-choice people aren't really convinced by this. We need actual arguments to respond to our position.
Well, except if your
Okay.
position isn't relevant to the conversation we're having, then it doesn't matter, right?
Well, it is. Like my discussion of consent regarding doctors is relevant to the discussion on
No, it's not.
consent regarding sex and pregnancy. Well, it is.
No, it's
because
not.
we're talking about the concept
Hold
of
on,
consent.
wait. Clinton, I think that your specific hypothetical about the doctor has been directly replied to. You may not like the reply, but I encourage you to go back and listen to this recording, because we have replied to you directly using the example that you used and talked about exactly where it is disanalogous to this conversation.
I don't recall anything being said about how it's disanalogous. Perhaps you could reiterate why you think the two situations are disanalogous.
Well, it's disanalogous because the doctor is assuming consent on the part of the patient. The patient has not actually provided his consent, but we allow that to happen because the doctor is able to actually save the life of the patient. That is not analogous to a woman taking on a risk because she wants to have sex but doesn't want to actually get pregnant.
Well, it is analogous, and this is the
No, it's
reason why
not.
it's analogous. The reason it's analogous is because we're talking about the concept of tacit consent. So pointing out that it's about a doctor saving a patient's life is irrelevant to whether or not my situation is analogous, because all I'm saying is that tacit consent is a real concept, and the doctor
may be a
is
real
saving the
concept,
life
but
of
it's
an
not
unconscious
relevant.
patient.
It
Well,
is-
no, in order to refute an analogy, you have to refute it at the point of where the analogy is meant to analogize. If you respond to an irrelevant point of the analogy, then we're not proving a disanalogy. You
But
can't
that
just
is what
point to
Darren
any.
is saying.
You can't just
that
point to
your
any.
analogy.
You can't just point to any
Let me-
difference and say that the analogy
Right.
doesn't work, because that's not the point of analogies. All analogies break down at some point.
Hold on, Clinton. Not a bunch of amateurs here. We all know about analogies. What Darren is telling you, and the thing that you are having trouble with, is that your analogy is not grappling with the point that he's making. And so if there's a fault here, the fault is entirely with you using the analogy and not engaging with the point of consent. Now, I understand that you're saying, oh, well, Darren's refusing to acknowledge where this analogy does make sense. But there's a clear disagreement over this analogy, and it's happening on both sides.
Well, yeah,
We-
but him refusing
Well, hold
to.
on. What I'm telling you is you're being a little disingenuous when you say, we don't understand the analogy.
Well, no,
I don't know why we're even wasting this much time.
Well,
Let's-
okay, so to recap for the listeners,
Nobody
the
cares
issue, to recap for the listeners,
the nuts and
the
bolts.
issue, to recap for the listeners, the issue here is one of whether consent to sex
We all know.
is consent to pregnancy. That is why we are spending this time.
Let's move on. People know the answer to that. Let's move on to the other issues. Everybody, that is basic. That is not something that is debatable in the minds of normal.
Well, it looks like it is debatable, Teddy.
I mean, it's debatable among people that want to try to prove their points.
Well, it looks like that's both sides, doesn't it?
Well, people know what the real answer is. So that's not something that we're really edifying anybody on. So,
So you're speaking for everyone out there now?
I am.
Okay, I'm not willing to let you do that.
We all know the answer to that. So
Yes, the answer is that you guys are wrong.
the point, okay, well, whatever, Darren, everybody out there knows what the answer is. Anybody that's,
Yeah, you keep telling yourself that.
okay, well,
Just
everybody that understands how people are, made. Everybody.
but that is exactly what's wrong with the conversation right here, Teddy.
I think
But
we know about the birds and the bees, and
But that is not what is being discussed here.
yeah, it's a risky business to have sex, and if people don't realize
Yes, but risk is not
Sex
consent.
is not consent to
it
pregnancy.
is when
No, it's
You can
not.
keep asserting it all you like. It doesn't make it
Look,
true.
if sex, it's this easy. If sex was consent to pregnancy, we wouldn't have contraception.
through how are babies made
If sex,
It
if sex
doesn't
was
matter.
consent,
does
if
matter.
sex was
It doesn't
consent to
matter.
pregnancy,
It
we
doesn't
wouldn't have contraception.
matter.
See, this is the main argument that anti-abortionists make. That makes everyone just roll their eyes, because every single one of the people out there, they know that when they have sex, they are not consenting to have a baby, because people have sex for recreation more than they have sex for when they're actually trying to get pregnant.
I'm jumping in real quick because we're about to lose Clinton. He's got a hard deadline in
Oh,
1 hour. So
we're
try to
about
get
to
the-
lose him in 1 hour.
I'm sorry, in 10 minutes. So try to get the most out of Clinton. When he goes, I will be glad to step into the
Okay.
chair.
sorry,
But
I'm sorry.
yeah, so I'm just, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, sorry about that. It's just, I've been here for a couple hours, and I do have plans to attend a function. So yeah, I've got about 10 minutes, and I've got to head out.
So Clinton, let me give you a couple of questions and let you reply, and then we'll pick up afterwards. So I think the first thing that was interesting in your opening had to do with full moral status, and I'd like for you to tease out for me when you think full moral status begins, and whether full moral status is something that the embryo achieves at the moment of conception, or whether full moral status is just something that we grant because it is how we ourselves want to be treated. So this is all part of the philosophical literature, I'm sure you know. Let's start with that, and I'll ask you another question when you finish your answer on full moral status.
Okay, and also
Hang on. I'm also going to ask a question because I want you to answer it too, which is, do you grant exceptions? So You can answer Andrew's question. My question will take you a millisecond to answer. Go ahead.
Okay, and also, I dropped my email in the chat, so if anyone wants to follow up with me after the discussion, I'd be happy to continue the discussion there too. Yeah, so regarding full moral status, it's something that, in my view, happens at fertilization. And the reason for that is because, as all of us understand, human life is marked by development. Development is not something that stops when the child is born. It actually continues. When the child is born, it can't survive on its own. It needs its parents to feed it. It needs its parents to continue talking to it, to continue loving it and caring for it, so that it can continue developing. And we don't actually stop developing until sometime in our mid-20s, when we reach our intellectual development peak. So human life is something that's marked by development. So the only non-arbitrary place to place full moral status is at fertilization, because the reason that it's non-arbitrary is because it's the only point at which we move from non-human entities, the sperm and the ovum, to a human entity, the human embryo / zygote, which is just the very early human embryo. All other points along human development are arbitrary because number one, where you place the capacity that's necessary for human value is going to differ from person to person. There's no objective way to know if it's consciousness or self-awareness or sentience or anything like that, which is the actual capacity that's required for moral status. Plus, even if you place it in one of those capacities, it's arbitrary where you place how much of it is required for human value. So the only non-arbitrary place to place where full moral status begins is at the point of fertilization, where the human embryo comes into existence. Because again, that's the only point we're moving from two non-human entities, the sperm and ovum, into a human entity, the embryo. And so to go even a little more philosophical than that, full moral status depends on your nature. It depends on the kind of thing that you are, not the kinds of capacities that you can perform. Things like self-awareness, sentience, consciousness, all of these are functions of persons. Just like you have to be a human before you can develop all of your human parts, you have to be a person before you can develop all of your personal properties. So saying that a person is someone who can engage in consciousness or self-awareness, etc., is to put the cart before the horse. You're confusing form with function. The form must be present first, because the form is what determines all of our ultimate capacities, not the other way around. So full moral status begins when the human embryo comes into existence. So that's my nutshell answer for when full moral status begins. And now I'll address David's question about exceptions. Whether there are exceptions depends on who you ask. Many pro-life people will say there are no exceptions, and then when you press them on life-saving abortions, they'll say, well, yeah, that's not really abortion, that's a life-saving medical procedure. I think that that's kind of a just kind of a semantic difference. So I would say that the one exception that I would hold would be in the case of life-saving abortions, and the reason for that is because of a couple different reasons, in fact. That number one, there is the situation of triage, where you have two people who are in mortal danger. You have the woman, for example, if we're talking about an ectopic pregnancy where the embryo implants in her fallopian tube, you have two people who are in mortal danger: the woman, the pregnant woman, and the embryo. Now, triage says that you must save the person who has the greatest chance of survival. If you try to save the embryo, you may lose them both. Because the embryo is going to continue growing and eventually rupture the tube, and the woman will hemorrhage and die. So you'll lose them both if you try to save the embryo. If you try to save the woman at least has a 100% chance of survival. So the woman is the one that you should save in a situation like that. Now, when it comes to late-term abortions, a late-term abortion is never medically necessary to save a woman's life. A C-section is about a 30-minute procedure, whereas a late-term abortion takes 3 days. So if a woman is in the late term and has some sort of issue that's threatening her life, the medically indicated thing to do would be to deliver the child rather than go in for an abortion, because it's safer for the woman, and it's also quicker and than to wait the few days for the abortion. So it's quicker and it's safer for the woman as well. Now, there's another way that we can look at life-saving abortions, and that's through the concept called double effect. That's where you're facing two situations, both of them bad, how do you act in such a situation? Because you could try to, you can try to kill the embryo to save the woman's life. Killing the embryo is bad. Or if you leave them alone, both of them will die. That's bad too. So what's the best way to act in such a situation? And so in order to act in such a situation, there are certain oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, certain rules that have to obtain in order for it to be permissible. But number one, the death of the embryo cannot be intended, but it can be foreseen. So you can act in such a way that the death of the embryo will be foreseen, but not intended. The intention here is to save the woman's life, not to kill the embryo. So you're acting in such a way that the death of the embryo is foreseen, but not intended. Also, the embryo cannot die by a direct action by the doctor. So certain ways of resolving, for example, an ectopic pregnancy would be out, like giving the woman methotrexate would be a way of directly killing the embryo in order to try to save the woman's life. That would not be permissible. But what would be permissible would be, for example, a salpingectomy, where you actually go in, you remove the portion of the fallopian tube that is threatening the woman's life, and then the embryo will die. That's foreseen but not intended. You're not intending to kill the embryo, you're intending to save the woman's life. And the embryo is not dying by a direct action of the doctor. The embryo will die indirectly by having the fallopian tube removed, but it will not die by a direct action from the doctor. So that would be, again, my sort of nutshell response to, are there any exceptions to no abortions? And I would say, in the early term, under certain conditions, it would be permissible to act in such a way that the embryo dies and that you save the woman's life.
Okay, thank you. David, does that take care of the question you had?
Yeah, at some point I'd like Teddy's answer too, but yes. And thank you, Clinton. We'll have you back on the show with something slightly less hot button. Thanks for being there, and thanks for standing your ground like a stud. We appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. Again, thanks for inviting me on. Sorry, I have to take off so quickly, but I'm sure the discussion will be a really good one.
Great talking with you.
Clinton, thank you.
Yep, you too.
Appreciate you.
Yep, you too. All right, take care.
You
Bye.
too. Teddy, does David need to repeat that question, or are you with it?
I think the only difference that I would have with Clinton is that now, I don't think that medically, for example, in an ectopic pregnancy, that there would ever be a need to do this, but because I do believe in the right of self-defense, I think that a physician, I think that morally there would be, it would be okay to actively do something against the fetus to protect the woman. It doesn't have to be something indirectly done to the fetus. I think you could do something purposefully to the fetus if the fetus poses a reasonable enough threat to the woman's life. But I mean, it's got to be a legitimate threat, like, not bogus stuff like.
And changing the course of her future isn't legitimate in your view?
I'm sorry?
Let me
Did you
get the
say
mic where you, is it easier to hear me now? I'd set back from the mic a little bit.
I think you just, did I hear you right? Did you say changing the course of her future?
Right, that's right. So
I'm thinking about life-threatening, like the pregnancy is going to kill her, and that a C-section is not going to do the trick. But most of the time, I mean, from everything that I've read, there's no reason to abort. Usually a C-section should do the trick. So, but I'm just saying, but let's just say hypothetically, if a C-section won't do the trick, and there has to be something done to the fetus for self-defense purposes in terms of life, I'll permit that. And I think that that's, morally okay. But not, I mean, we don't permit in our society, for example, can a woman kill her 2-year-old if it's, financially inconvenient? Can a woman kill her 2-year-old if it's going to cause her problems with with her college education, or, you can't, if you can't do it to a 2-year-old, then you can't do it, or you shouldn't be able to do it to your unborn baby. I mean, look, we talk about the importance of bodily autonomy. Look, I'm down with that. I get it. I'm a female, right? And I'm all about that. And I was all about not wanting to get pregnant early on. And you know what? There are lots of ways that women can exercise bodily, and the ways that they can do it are, and they don't involve killing their unborn babies. Now, I mean, rape is an exception to that, but I will get to that. But the first thing is that, again,
Hang on before so you did just say that you would give exception for rape. Is that correct?
no. Okay, hold on. We're talking about, I think you're merging two different things.
I might be. That's why I butted in right here.
Okay. I thought I'm talking now about bodily autonomy in terms of ways.
Okay, so you don't believe that rape is an exception for divorce, abortion. That wouldn't be a.
No.
Okay, all right, good. Thanks for clearing that up.
But what I'm saying is, because some people say, or I mean, just most people are kind of like, we want women to have the right to bodily autonomy. And I'm for that, of course. But the question is it an absolute right? And the issue is when you have two competing rights. So the right to life, you've got the woman's right to life, you've got the unborn baby's right to life. Whose right is more valuable? Well, they're both of equal value. And so they have to both they're both on a moral plane. Unless one is threatening the other, they don't have the right to try to cancel each other out. And it's only in that situation where might makes right.
Let me ask you a question right there. Let's say it doesn't even have to be a 2-year-old, pick your age. We have a child.
Mhm.
That child is going to die from kidney failure. The mother is determined to be a match, which is quite often the case. Relatives are more likely to be matches than strangers. So does the mother have to give up a kidney to her child to save its life?
No. Should the mother?
So she has bodily autonomy in that case, not to save the child.
At that point, the mother is separated. Now, I think there's a moral duty for the mother to do that. But at that point, they're not combined. I think that there's a moral duty for the mom to do that. But
so here's where we differ. So in large part, I do think that we have some ethical responsibility. Where you and I differ is only that I believe the mother has the right to her body from the beginning, not after separation.
the difference is that there's a difference between the duty. There's a difference between trying to save somebody versus killing somebody. So when a baby,
No, the person's going to die.
no, but
Okay, go ahead. I see what you're saying.
but that's a duty to save. So it's a different thing. Those aren't the same thing. So when a baby is in your womb, and you're having an abortion, you are killing that baby. If a baby,
It's not a baby in the womb.
Okay, yeah, but if somebody has, a medical problem and they need some sort of life-saving assistance, well, then, people can have the choice of whether they want to give this aid or not. And if they don't, then nature takes its course, but somebody is not, plunging in the dagger, so to speak.
Okay,
There's not
but
a,
you do agree it's not a baby in the womb. I think we've got to be a little more careful about
oh, I
that.
think it is a baby. What, it's not, why isn't it a baby?
Well, can I provide some facts? Because whenever
Please.
whenever the anti-abortion, I mentioned this in my article, but my post, but whenever the word baby gets around, it muddies the water, because when people say baby, they think, oh, laughing baby with feelings and emotions and all that. A fetus in the womb is incapable of any of that. So
It's
we're not actually talking about a baby.
like baby or like an unborn, yeah,
So a
term for baby, pretty much.
So when we are talking about an abortion, we're actually talking 99% of abortions happen before the 20th week. No abortions happen after the 24th week because, as Clint was saying, they don't abort at that point, they deliver.
Okay, and
Because,
that is such a ridiculous false distinction that I can't.
well, you haven't let me finish yet. So are you going to let me finish, or are you going to go on some emotional tirade?
Saying stuff that
Emotional tirade it is.
Steve, oh, that's not an abortion because it's past 24. That's a delivery. Please, they're killing them. They're aborting. They are
Teddy.
station of life, which is what an abortion is. That's not a delivery. That's
Yep,
Can you say that the two of you might not be talking about the same thing?
that's playing with words. You're
Hold on. Can you see?
telling
Can
me.
you, Teddy? Can you see that the two of you may not be talking about the same procedure?
He was saying. I thought
He said delivery. You said abortion. Can you see that those two aren't the same thing?
I thought that's what he was talking about, where he was just trying to use a euphemism.
No, there is no euphemism. The current medical capabilities that we have makes infants viable at 24 weeks. So they don't abort them at 24 weeks, they deliver them.
22 weeks.
Well,
the medical expert the medical doctor
who was an
who was
OBGYN.
going to appear on this show and ultimately didn't because she was afraid for her safety.
Okay, well, she was incorrect.
I'll just have to say that I'm going to go with the OBGYN on this one.
Okay, well, I'm just going to say, check your facts.
Considering you never check your facts, I think that's sort of hypocritical.
And everybody listening to me can check the internet in numerous places. Current medical technology says 22 weeks.
I got 24.
22 weeks, because the first thing I did was check her facts.
Okay, well, I am going to go with the OBGYN on this one and not your internet search. Sorry.
She is one. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't.
Okay,
right, and maybe your internet search was good and maybe it wasn't. We can play that game all day long.
In numerous articles.
Well, the reality is that 99% of all abortions happen before 20 weeks. So do you know when the brain actually is capable of feeling emotions and having thoughts? The very, very minimum.
None of that's relevant to me.
It is relevant because it's 36
right,
weeks.
It may not, it's not relevant to Teddy.
No, it's not. It's about robbing a human of the ability to experience life on earth. That's what it's about.
So you think experiencing life in heaven is worse than experiencing life on earth?
God, and see, you are trying to, let's get back to your opening statement where you were trying to say, oh, like we're trying to avoid the heaven and hell thing. No, Darren, we're just trying to.
Your entire argument is devoid of any belief in heaven or hell.
With atheists, and if we start arguing God, you're going to say, you're going to argue God when you got to first prove that exists. And we're trying to make secular arguments to appeal to godless atheists too.
Right. Well, and other Christians.
As possible. Okay,
But-
because I could easily say you shouldn't slaughter your baby because it was created in the image of God, and to slaughter your baby, you disrespect God because that baby is formed in the image.
I don't care if I disrespect a fantasy God.
Okay, control room, David Johnson, I need you to do me a favor, David.
So Ryan
David, I
accommodated
need you to do me a favor and put everyone on the channel on mute for 5 seconds. I have a question to ask, and I need 5 seconds of silence. So if you'll put everyone on mute, I'd appreciate it. Tell me when it's done.
Since I don't have a one-click mute button, I'm just going to ask everyone to stay muted for
Go ahead, Andrew.
a little bit.
Everyone go on mute. 5 seconds. I've got a question. There's supposed to be a God in this conversation. This God is supposed to be exercising moral judgment about what humans are doing with their own bodies. This God is supposed to have an opinion, a quite strong opinion, one that should matter to this conversation. That God usually has a cosmic mute button, seems to be quiet, but if there's a God out there that cares about this particular conversation, it is time for you to speak up. You have 5 seconds to find your mute button, turn it off, and give your opinion. The clock starts now.
I'm sorry. Were you calling on actually God to come in and comment on the conversation, or were you talking about us to bring in the subject of
5 seconds of silence, please. Christian God, here's your opportunity. 5 seconds of silence. Okay, good enough.
Yeah. God,
So
God does.
whatever this God may or may not think, not willing to speak up here.
He obviously doesn't care enough about it to speak up. So why
God
should you
doesn't
care?
answer to y'all. And
Oh, so, but he's talking to you.
I'm just saying,
Is he talking to you?
is God talking to me right now? No, I mean,
Have you read his diary? Do you know what he thinks about every little thing? Are you sure that he's against abortion, considering that 2/3 of pregnancies end in a miscarriage?
I am because I have seen where God, under Mosaic law, and I'm not quite sure
You
whether,
mean under Mosaic law, where he sent bears to kill children, drowned an entire world, killed firstborn sons,
I'm not whether
had firstborn sacrificed to him? That God?
I'm not sure. I know that God wants the death penalty for murderers. In
And
terms
people that pick up sticks on his favorite day.
Okay, once again, control room, 5 seconds of silence. Christian God, do you want the death penalty for anyone? 5 seconds. Find your cosmic mute button.
okay, Andrew, come on.
No, I'm not. Look, I am tired of people saying what God wants. If
You know
God
what?
wants something,
I
he
think
can speak up.
you were a Christian for long enough. So unless you
Yes, I was damn sure a Christian for long enough.
unless you were just crazy for that many years, but you know what? If your judgment was skewed for that many years into your adult years, because you were still
Katie, is God talking to you right now?
no, God is not talking to me.
Okay.
Then why are you talking for God?
I'm talking for myself.
So let's
You have said
let's.
repeatedly God wants.
I'm gonna go ahead and jump in here just a moment to create a little bit of listenable content. So there is a question on the table, and Teddy, I know that theology is not your strongest subject, but I think that, and I don't mean that in a mean way. It's just not fair to ask you to carry the theological water on this stuff. So I don't expect that, but I do think that there is a fair conversation, so let's see if we can have it with some hint of dignity and some hint of brevity, since we know that there's no one on the other side to argue it. So, Teddy, it's okay for you to make a Christian argument sometimes, and it's because you're not a secularist, and you're not going to ever make the great secularist argument. But I care personally about what the Christian argument is, and I don't want to see Christians hiding the argument because they think that atheists are going to make fun of it. Of course they are. We're godless atheists. We're servants of Satan. We already know that. But we need to know what the Christian argument is, so that we're not arguing against straw men. And so I just want you, if you don't mind, to take a moment and tell us really why you think Christians should be against abortion, because the fact is, most Christians are not against abortion in this country.
I just did. Oh, and the Bible tells us that every human is created in the image of God. And as a result, that is what gives us value, because we are created in his image. And that is why God said that for somebody who takes a life intentionally for murder, that person gets the death penalty.
Okay, so you do believe that abortion is murder. I'm getting that from you.
I do. I mean,
Okay, that's fine. And do you believe that God does that God kills infants in the womb?
I think that what God does, I'm not going to, I don't even, what God does is what God does.
Okay, well then would you say it's okay if God kills infants in the womb?
I think whatever God is the person who creates what the moral structure is. I'm
Right.
not touching whatever God does, God does.
And I'm not asking you to defend or not defend it. I'm really just trying to get your position. So your position is that God, because I want to at least make sure that we're arguing apples to apples. My position is that God, if he exists, does more abortions than the most ambitious abortionist in the form of miscarriages. But you would say, and once again, I'm not trying to straw man you, I'm just trying to understand the position. You would say, but God has a right to kill those babies.
God doesn't have to play by rules. God
Okay,
rule maker, and the rules are for us.
that's fine. Just one or two. So it's murder if we do it. It's a violation of thou shalt not kill, but it's not murder if God does it, because God's God and he has a right to do what he wants in the human realm. Is that a fair assessment of how you see this?
I believe that that's how it works. I mean, those
Okay.
rules are for.
But there's a different problem here. When put directly to the question, you said God does what God does. The whole point of me having a moment of silence to let the Christian God speak up was actually to be able to determine in some meaningful way what God does. When you say God does what God does, what you're inviting is to simply pick and choose from the range of outcomes the thing that you think God wanted. If that's not what you're doing,
No,
if that's not what you're doing, it's your responsibility to be able to demonstrate
no,
what God does
No.
and when he does it.
I would have to be above God to be.
No, you wouldn't.
Yes, I would.
I do not know. I do not have to be an astronomer to use a telescope. I don't have to be a mathematician to evaluate whether a problem is correct.
I do not.
I am asking you to be able to say, with some clear means of determination,
mind read.
what God does.
I cannot even see God. How would I know what God does?
Plus, you have
I
the problem
think
with
that's
the
a drop the
Molinist.
mic moment, boys and girls. I am going to take a break.
Yeah, well, another problem you have is the Molinist position. Because if the Molinist is right and God's position is to get as many souls as possible to heaven, then you are actively defying your God every time you stop an abortion, because the more abortions there are, the more souls are going to heaven.
Darren, the problem with your position on that is that God has put earth here because he wants us to experience earth. Okay.
Well, you don't know that though.
He
That's your
put
opinion, but that you don't actually know that.
he put earth here because he wants us to experience earth. Now
Except for the miscarriages.
he gave
Right.
us free will. Now he can see what's going to happen and what we're going to do with our free will, but he doesn't get in the way of our free will.
But
Right,
you would
but
agree that
that-
his miscarriages aren't free will, right? That's God acting in.
That's just nature. That's
Okay.
Right, and it's worth noting that miscarriages take up 2/3 of pregnancies, just to put that out there.
I mean, that's probably about right. I mean, I know they're a high number. Sure. So sure, I'll go with that.
Right. So there's no way that a human abortionist can be more prolific an abortionist than God is. And you're claiming that the human is somehow immoral by doing that. But I mean, imagine that there actually is a God.
Darren, is there
From his perspective, people, whether they're on earth or heaven, does that really matter to him? I mean, why should it matter?
Are we talking about apples to apples? If somebody has a heart attack versus if I stab somebody in the heart, are those equivalents or equivalent things? Of course not. One is
No, the apples to apples would be if God stabs the person in the heart, or whether a human stabs the person in the heart.
no.
That would be the apples to apples.
Natural occurrence.
Right, and the natural occurrences are caused by
And
God.
let's pretend hey, Darren, you're an atheist. You don't believe in God, but do you believe in heart attacks? Sure you do. So take God out of the equation. You see that there is such a thing as heart attacks, right? So you know that a heart attack happens, and you also know that sometimes people get stabbed in the heart. Are those
Sure.
two different things? Yes, they are.
When you take the God out of it, sure, but not when you put the God back in.
Okay, but my point is, those are two different things.
Only if God is removed from the equation.
So a miscarriage is a completely different thing from an abortionist going in
Only if you pretend there's no God.
and doing a D&C and sucking out and dismembering. And
Yeah, that doesn't happen. Not very often.
not very often.
99% of the abortions don't actually do that.
No, those abortions that are all happening early on, those babies are being dismembered when they're sucked out.
Do you have any idea how awful a miscarriage is? I mean, I don't mean to get overly personal, but I've been married to women, and they're pretty bad. And it sounds like you're saying, well, yeah, but God's abortions aren't bad, but they are bad.
I have had
They're psychologically bruising.
Yeah, my mom had an abortion. She had a hard time with that. Or
and-
not an
and-
abortion, but a miscarriage.
now
Two of them.
Other thing too that people do not take into consideration. Our culture has made it sound like, oh, it's your choice. It's your choice.
You mean the
And
culture that's like 85% Christian?
They're making it seem like, oh, like it's not a big deal. And there are a lot of women who have a lot of psychological pain because
Yep, and 85% of women after 5 years feel relief after having an abortion, even the ones
Okay.
that had a lot of problems to begin with.
there are a lot of women that
Let me put this to rest. There's an issue that we do need to talk about here. And that is the issue of counseling. Now, the reason that's important here is because what we want to know when a woman goes in for an abortion is what sort of counseling she should get, because many red states are requiring counseling now for young women or women of childbearing age to have counseling, sometimes sometimes multiple sessions of counseling, and to wait on the abortion before they're allowed to have it. Now, on April 11th, in the journal Social Science and Medicine, there was a study released. It's the largest study of its kind, about 1,000 women tracked over 21 states in the United States. They were tracked for 5 years. There were 11 interviews for each participant, one at the 1 week mark and 10 more at equal 6-month marks. And they were asked a range of questions. Again, this is April 11th, the April issue of Social Science and Medicine. For anybody that wants to look the study up, go to your local library. It's a peer-reviewed academic journal, so you're probably not going to be able to get it online. You'd have to get behind the paywall. Go to your library. 84% of women reported having positive feelings about their abortion 5 years further on. 10% of women were neutral, and 6% reported having negative feelings. However, over 70% of those women, apologies for not remembering the exact number and not having the journal article in front of me, but over 70% of them were afraid of social isolation if their abortion became known. It is a myth, capital M, that women have some overwhelmingly negative response to abortion.
I don't believe
Now,
it.
you don't have to trust me. I have given clear instructions for the listeners. I strongly encourage you to look it up. And I will say this: I don't have a problem with counseling women about abortion. It's got to be a serious decision. However, we should be fair about how this study affects the conclusions regarding abortion. And this is not the only study of its kind. It's not near the only study. So, Teddy, I don't care whether you believe it. I'm not asking you to.
Well,
I am
I-
instructing the listeners on how to get to the information.
I will just have to question the character of anybody that does that and has no feelings about that.
I question your character, questioning their character.
No,
Yeah, you can be as judgy as you like. And
Yeah.
that's why most of those women have problems coming out about it, because people like you.
no, to not feel bad about that. No, it's one thing to feel bad and then to repent and to then be forgiven,
What do you mean repent?
to acknowledge that somebody has done something wrong. And then,
Repent is a religious word.
well, I know
Yeah,
that.
and you still haven't demonstrated it's actually wrong.
So then if somebody is not religious, then to just acknowledge, whatever, and, I don't know, with, do something in order to make amends or
Well, the problem is if you actually believe in heaven and hell, then there are no amends to make.
yes, there
Because
are,
you
because
guaranteed a person's slot in heaven.
there is still this earth, okay? So
So?
it's not just about having a quick,
So you would rather they be tortured for all eternity in hell?
I'm sorry?
You'd rather they be tortured for all eternity in hell?
You know what? God gave us free will.
Well, I'm not asking for you to excuse your repugnant God. I'm asking you, do you believe it's better to be tortured for all eternity in hell than to spend eternity in heaven?
No, God gave us the opportunity to have the experience on earth and to exercise our free will.
That doesn't answer the question. Do you think it's better to burn forever in hell or to be in heaven forever?
Person has their choice. God does not.
Okay,
want-
so you obviously think it's better to be in heaven. You're just avoiding the question because you know it completely torpedoes your position.
When you choose, whatever you choose, that's your choice. So, what
Darren wasn't questioning choice. He was questioning which outcome was best.
So let me step in one more time and provide just a brief intermission for the combatants to catch their breath. As everyone knows, I care about the theological side, and I don't have anyone on the show to debate theology with. So some of you theological wonks out there who want to take this toward the theological, I'll be around this week, Skeptics and Seekers. .squarespace.com. Just drop into the comments, sign in to discuss. We'll have that. But I just want to offer my drop the mic moment on the theological side, and I'll let these guys get back to the battle. Although they all seem to be a bit punch drunk right now. I mean, they're all holding maces and their arms are having trouble lifting them to beat each other over the head with at this point, which is somewhat amusing.
Jealous.
That's
Jealous.
That said, I'm just going to comment on the theology. The idea that God is against abortions. So I must say that when I was a Christian, because everyone always says, well, what did you think when you were a Christian? I honestly didn't think about this subject at all when I was a Christian. Okay, so that's because I was surrounded by people who didn't talk about abortion anyway. So it's not like we talked about abortion every week. That wasn't our big thing. So I didn't think about it. But if I were just putting it together from my Bible reading, I would have said God does not have a position on abortion one way or the other. As an atheist, though, I wouldn't even spare God's feelings that much. God loves abortion. God is in favor of abortion. Come at me, bros. Numbers chapter 5. I love the Bible so much. Hang on, Teddy. I know you've never heard this passage, but here we go. Numbers chapter 5, verse 11. I wish Clinton were here so I could have given this to him. Chapter 11, verse 16. So here we go. The priests. So this is. I'm actually truncating this passage. So if you want to accuse me of, taking it out of context, you can. It's a long reading. This is the remedy of a jealous husband. If a husband suspects that his wife has been cheating on him, and she's pregnant. Yes, because God cares about this sort of thing. And there was a way that if the husband was just suspicious of it and jealous, he could take it to the priest. And there's this very, very sane, very, very fair, very, very scientific way of telling whether she cheated or not. So verse 16, the priest shall bring her and have her stand before the Lord. Then he shall take some holy water in a clay jar and put some dust from the tabernacle floor on the water. After the priest has had the woman stand before the Lord, he shall loosen her hair and place in her hands the reminder offering, the grain offering for jealousy. This has a point, just bear with me. While he himself holds the bitter water that brings a curse. Then the priest shall put the woman under oath and say to her, if no other man has had sexual relations with you, and you have not gone astray and become impure while married to your husband, may this bitter water that brings a curse not harm you. But if you have gone astray while married to your husband, and you have made yourself impure by having sexual relations with a man other than your husband, here the priest is to put the woman under the curse. May the Lord cause you to become a curse among your people when he makes your womb miscarry and your abdomen swell. May this water that brings a curse into your body so that your abdomen swells of your womb or your womb miscarries. So that's the end of this very lengthy, barbaric reading of the ceremony. It's laid out very clear. It's very plain that one of the exceptions to abortion, if God doesn't like abortion at all, is, if you cheated on your husband. Well, we'll kill the thing then. We'll kill it under those circumstances. God loves abortion. He's okay with it. He uses it as a punishment. I could have chosen another passage where God uses the death of a baby as a punishment. He's okay with this stuff. And I don't understand why Christians get bent out of shape. So I'm not asking you to respond to this, Teddy, but any theological wonks who want to go a few rounds in the ring with me in the comments, go for it. I turn the melee back over to the participants after you have caught your breath now. Intermission over.
I don't understand why Christians are against it either, considering they supposedly believe in heaven.
But you have to just kind of, David,
Yeah.
distinguish between which God does and what we do. So
Right, but you
But
do
you already
acknowledge that God
you
is
can't
God is
tell
using
what God does.
God is
You-
using a priest to make a woman abort. That's what it is. God is using a priest to give a woman poison to make her abort.
whatever he wants. He is the creator of everything.
Okay, so but
So if
but
God
you're
doesn't
saying
care
that
about
God is
abortion, why
against
do?
abortion. He's not
Um,
against abortion.
Hold
God
on.
is
Let me
against
just,
us committing
Teddy,
abortions because we are created in his image. And so we must respect each other, because when we kill each other, we disrespect him.
But we're only created in his
Hold on,
image
guys.
if
Teddy-
if the wife hasn't cheated on her husband. If it's not a cheat baby, then
oh, Teddy, would you say that this would be something that Dale would say? So I don't think I would be taking him out of context here. I don't think I'd be misattributing to it. Would you say that if God spoke directly to a woman who was pregnant and said, "You should abort that child. That child is not of me, it's of Satan," or whatever he says to her? I don't actually care what it might be. Would you say that she is in the right to abort the child if God tells her to? I'm just curious. It seems like you're saying God can do anything, doesn't it? So if she's in late trimester, if she's in her third trimester, and God says,
Thank you.
"Hey Jan, you should abort
Bring
that
the
child."
whole Dale Abraham challenge to me. Thank you so much.
No, I'm not actually trying to shovel that baggage onto you. I'm asking you a legitimate question. Do you think?
Oh, what you've done is you've just done that.
Well, that's a legitimate question.
Look, I admit that had the undesirable effect.
Well, it's a legitimate question given Teddy's position.
Well, it was precisely done. I mean, how could it be anything but that?
okay, but you are in agreement then that the passage in Numbers, when the priest performs an abortion, that's okay. Because that was God, right?
Is that the get out of jail free card, Teddy? Can she say God wanted me to?
Here's what I'm going to say. You know what? I'm going to answer your question.
I'm not being ugly. I really am
Answer
genuinely
your
curious.
question. And it's actually going to be different from what Dale said, that I would have failed the test that Abraham would have passed.
Good for you.
But I've got a reason to, because I mean I've got a broader understanding of just different biblical principles that perhaps Abraham didn't have the benefit of. But sometimes they talk about how if you want to know if certain signs are from God or are from the devil, you look to see whether the results would give glory to God or not.
Well, okay,
I would
sure.
argue that if somebody is getting a message to kill their baby, and given that that baby is created in the image of God, that message is not giving glory to God.
No, I specifically said though,
Guys.
right? I specifically said that God says that
Listen,
this baby is not his. It's a Satan baby
but you
or whatever.
look, how does the woman know for 100% certainty who the message is coming from? It could-
I agree.
Okay, so listen. So
Which
see,
completely undermines your point, Teddy.
answer.
Well, I, for one, like your answer, Teddy, and I don't care why you would defy God in that situation. I don't care what mental gymnastics you use. The fact is, you would do the right thing, and I appreciate that.
But that's actually the point I think that has to be drawn out here. Is that we don't care overly much. And Darren has, or David, maybe it was you, pointed out just how much of our society is Christian. And that much of that population is pro-choice. The truth is, we don't particularly care what the Bible says. And none of us, as has been demonstrated
So many of them are
pretty easily here, nobody actually knows whether there's a God and what it thinks. And if they do, it's certainly not clear, because the Christian position on abortion is all over the map. And as far as I can tell, the only sensible position is to say that no one has the right to use another person's body without their permission.
Okay, but Andrew, here's the thing. When, I mean, a woman's body is naturally designed. I mean, that is nature. Just
I don't agree that it's naturally designed. I don't agree that there's design.
it is designed. A man's body is.
If it is
I'm
designed, it's
going to
designed
ask
to
for 5
miscarriage
seconds of
2/3 of the time.
silence.
No, I mean, look. Can you carry a baby? Can any of you guys carry babies? No.
The word that I am objecting to
A
is
car.
the
Car is
word that I am objecting to is the word design.
okay, but you know what? Cars are designed, but they're not designed by God, but they're still designed. Bridges are designed. Houses are designed.
Okay, well,
Right.
your God designed the human body to miscarriage 2/3 of the time.
Okay, so what? Okay, look, things are designed. They don't have
He
to be.
obviously can't be that perturbed about it if he designed the body to do it.
You're changing the subject. I'm talking about.
Teddy, you've got to prove that
The
God
body-
did anything. You said you don't know what God does and doesn't.
Let's give Teddy a little bit of leeway to
Absurd. The female body of animals is designed to reproduce. I mean, or to carry. Well, no, I think the seahorse. Wasn't the seahorse?
There are plenty of
Whatever. I
plenty
mean,
of examples.
let's just talk about humans, all right? And most animals. It's the
Well, you'd be okay saying mammals, probably.
okay, so
Yeah.
so it is designed, whether it be by nature or God or whomever. Now, you just can't get around that. That it is or it isn't, and we know that it is. So, just like we can't help getting older, it just happens. And that's the situation. We have to just deal with it. So when certain things happen, like sex, when people assume the risk of sex, and let's not get back into that whole thing, but a woman gets pregnant, one way or another, then there's the question of she's got a right to life, the baby's got a right to life. You've got two competing rights. Now, having a baby when you don't want one, and that, I mean, I'm not going to say, look, I've been pregnant. So can it hamper your lifestyle a bit? Well, yeah, a bit, not that much.
That
Talking
might,
from privilege there.
No.
that was wow.
That's fine. Just
wow.
just let her
Yeah, I
say
mean, like
it.
if somebody's got violent morning sickness all the time, well then that's not the typical,
Sorry, I've got to go on mute.
horrible morning sickness. Most of the time, most women have it to some degree in the first trimester, and then usually the second trimester is not, usually it goes away, and then third trimester, some women get it just a little bit. Some women have it just horribly. But in general, it's not like you're stuck in a prison, but it's 9 months. It's a finite period. So is it an inconvenience? Okay, some people might think so. Some women love being pregnant. Can it completely derail your plans? Would it be devastating to some women to have an unplanned pregnancy, especially when they're young? And by the way, a substantial number of pregnancies occur in women who already have one or more children. And some of these women are not young at all. And some of these women are quite a bit older. So it's not all these little just teenagers that are, too stupid to know about contraception, or too reckless. So the thing is that, the thing is about bodily autonomy is that women have control over whether to have sex. And then if they choose to have sex, contraception. And then the woman herself can use multiple forms of contraception. She can use an IUD. She can use implants in her arm. She can get her tubes tied.
Folks, this is medical advice. No, sorry, Teddy, I'm going to interrupt you. This is not a show where there is a medical professional, and nothing about your contraceptive measures. None of this is medical advice. And whatever you choose to do in regard to your reproductive health, you should do it in consultation with your physician. This is not medical advice.
And I'd also like to comment on this whole design thing. So let's pretend that Teddy's right.
Before you do, I'm gonna put the marker down here. Darren will get the mic. But this
It's an important point. Autonomy.
I am simply going to say that you should start pulling out your best arguments. So over the next few minutes, if you've got anything in the bag, this is for all the participants. Now's the time to take it out, and we will give you a few rounds with your best stuff and go to closing statements. Darren.
All right, I was just going to say, let's pretend that Teddy's correct and God designed the female body to be pregnant. So this is what he's designed into his design. 1, that 2/3 of pregnancy would end in miscarriage. 2, that in about 808 women die from pregnancy and childbirth-related causes every day. This is the design that her God supposedly created.
In places where there's not good health care, not in America.
No, it's in America.
No, not in America. It's been shown. No, where?
According to the United Nations Population Fund, 2017 report,
Even the
about one woman every 2 minutes, and for every woman who dies, 20 or 30 encounter complications with serious or long-lasting
That
consequences.
is not true.
Most of these deaths and injuries are entirely preventable.
Not true.
Teddy, would it be better if it happened in one of those shithole countries?
No, it wouldn't be.
I mean,
I
I don't understand.
And this is using modern medicine to do this.
I was quoting Trump people, okay? I don't. So
Fake facts.
Yeah, worldwide, it's about 303,000 women die of pregnancy or childbirth related causes.
Well, sure, because and how many people are dying of hunger? I mean, there are people dying. There are tragedies
Well,
happening.
this is the design your God chose.
Okay,
So if we are going to take your claim that God designed
you know what?
this, then this is what he designed. If we are going to take you seriously, this is what your God designed.
The design and you know, your attempt to poison the well doesn't change the fact that the body is designed. So you can argue whatever you want because you know you're on the losing
Okay,
end of that argument.
hold on.
Your attempt
Hold on.
Okay, so now the body
Hold-
isn't designed. Okay.
Guys,
your attempt to
people-
change the
people, listen for a second. There's an important issue here.
you can't answer the
Just, hold on. Just let me draw out the issue that needs to be addressed. Whether the human body is a result of natural evolution, or whether it is the result of some divine creation, invites the importation of Christian ethics versus humanist ethics. And to simply say that it doesn't matter whether it's evolution or some Christian God that did it, is the thing that is allowing you, Teddy, to say, oh, it doesn't matter how it was done, this is what you're stuck with. But that is not, in fact, the case. It does matter whether there's a divine spark or whether there's not.
The answer is that a professor of mine, Dr. Robert Kane, I'll never forget, it had to do with the question of whether God has always existed. It was a philosophy class, and then the topic of religion had come up. And it was just so hard for me the concept of something always existing. And after class, I went and asked him a question about that. And he said, you know, sometimes we have to realize that there just might be certain concepts we will just never, in our capacity as humans, just be able to understand. And as much as that wasn't an answer, it was an answer. And I'm like, you know, there's something to that. What makes us think that we can understand all that there is to understand?
We can't live by concepts we don't understand.
Right. And if your case is that God is wants something, and yet his design clearly shows that you're wrong about what he wants, then that is relevance.
No, there's going to be something. Sometimes we have to have the wisdom to understand that there are going to be things that we don't understand and don't.
Eddie, can you live by a principle that you don't understand?
It's not living by that principle. I'm living by lots of principles that I do understand. But what I'm saying is that there are other things that I don't have the answer to. I'm not going to.
Then you shouldn't act as if you do.
Question I have, huh?
If there is a question to which you don't have an answer,
Mm-hmm.
then you can't proceed as if you do have an answer.
Right. I mean, I agree, but
Okay.
you don't have to have an answer for everything in order to do something. Otherwise,
Sure.
we would all just be stuck in a corner and not do anything. And that
Right,
would
but you're making
Yeah.
a lot of claims here that when pushed to it, you at the very bottom, you say you don't understand.
No, that's what I'm saying is, I'm sorry, Darren, do you somehow think you have an answer for everything?
I'm not the one that's claiming to know the mind of
I
God,
asked you
so
a question. Do you have an answer for everything?
I've
No.
never claimed to.
Nope, nobody does. So my point is, no single person does, and the person that says that they do, they're an idiot. Okay.
Right, but you're
If
making an
your- if
awful
your
lot of
claim
claims
is
about
that
God.
if your claim is that God is against abortion, which is, you know, I was asking earlier to get to the Christian
If
position.
God- no,
If that's
okay,
if
first of all,
that's your claim,
okay, first of all, that's not my claim. My claim is that the rules for humans, okay, is that we are prohibited from taking lives that are innocent.
God
Except when
told
God
us
tells
how
us
to
to.
do that.
Those
He
are
told
rules.
us how to do it with the bitter waters and things. So once again,
I
I'm
don't
not trying to
believe in
beat
the
you up on
notion of
stuff that
innocence.
I'm not trying to beat you up over stuff that you haven't studied. But
Yeah,
it does sound like your case is that God has a design for us and he wants us to follow certain rules. And I am challenging the very as a theist, I'm putting on my theist hat and joining other Christians in this argument. This is not an atheist Christian argument.
why?
Christians would agree with me. God is not against abortion in the way you're saying he is. That is, you're misrepresenting your God.
But David, this whole argument is disingenuous because you are an atheist, and
Right, but I'm telling you, I can argue with you as a Christian better than you can argue with me as an atheist. And
ball
there, and
on
there are Christians who would agree with me. The Bible seems to agree with me. I'd be glad to talk about that.
I
But
hate
if you're saying that we can't know the will of God, we can't know whether God is against abortion or not, then I don't understand what the Christian is arguing then.
no, because we know in Genesis where God has said that, you know, he says that the government should issue the death penalty for people that kill.
Yeah,
And
and for
We'll
people
be
that pick
talking
up sticks on his favorite day.
we'll be talking about the death penalty next week, so I'll ask you to hold your water there.
that included situations with women that are pregnant. So he considered the unborn baby to be a human.
Really? Did he do that when he drowned the entire world?
Well,
How about when he killed all the
why?
firstborn in Egypt?
again,
How about when he told all his soldiers to kill the
How
unborn
about when he
baby?
allowed Cain
again,
to kill Abel?
God does not, you forget.
No, I don't forget.
Yes, you do. Okay, then you're just playing games. Then you're intentionally trying to deceive then if you haven't forgotten.
No, I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy of your position, how
I-
incoherent it is.
I have repeatedly said, God has made those rules for us. Those don't apply
Eddie,
to him.
Eddie, you haven't been able, look, I put you to this and you said, God does what God does. And you haven't been able to say with any clarity what rules God made and what rules he didn't make. And in fact, you even said that if God told a woman to take the life of a fetus, to have an abortion, she shouldn't take his advice. And then you said, but you can't even be sure
I'm saying
that
that
voice
woman,
was God.
I am saying that that woman has to roll the dice to figure out whether that's really God or whether that's
And I'm saying she doesn't need to roll dice.
Satan telling her that.
Okay, so starting to wrap up.
Well, let's get back to my bodily autonomy because that's an interesting point. And
That's fine. Is this your best point to start winding down on?
I
Because
suppose.
I want you to have your best opportunity,
Alright.
and it's perfectly okay to step away from the theological stuff. I have already acknowledged that there, I can't argue that here. I put that out there for the listeners and the commenters. So don't get dragged down that road. I don't want to see you do that. That's not going to help you. But bring out what you are strong with, so that we can start the wrap up. Darren, Andrew, just kind of start zeroing in on the one question you have for the other person, the thing that you want to hear answered, and we'll start winding it up.
So again, we keep talking and keep hearing about a woman's right to choose. Well, the right to choose, that's implying that we've got this absolute right to bodily autonomy. And that right to bodily autonomy is not absolute. It stops at the moment that starts to impact someone else. And when you have two competing rights that are the same nature, so when you have a right to life that goes up against someone else's right to life, then there's the question of, is one right to life infringing upon the other? And then that triggers the right to self-defense that I mentioned. But if it's a right to life versus, so you've got the unborn baby's right to life versus a woman's liberty, like she doesn't want to be pregnant because it's going to be either a financial hardship or she doesn't want, it'll derail her her college experience, things like that. I mean, I understand that. I delayed pregnancy for quite a while. I mean, that would have been absolutely horrifying to me. I can guarantee you. And you know what? I made sure that I did not get pregnant because I can tell you, I was very firmly and have always been firmly pro-life. And there was just no way that I was going to have an abortion. And then there was no way that I was going to get pregnant. And so I took measures. I was like, and so the ways that we women can make sure, barring rape, I mean, that's a different story. Then that's somebody overcoming your will. But you can choose to not have sex. You can, or if you choose to have sex, well, you're taking some risk if you have sex, because as soon as you start to have sex, there's the possibility of pregnancy. Now, if anybody says that there's not the possibility of pregnancy with sex, I'm sorry. There's a lack of brain cells going on there. If you have sex, there's the possibility of pregnancy. So you can, if you're going to gamble with that, you can try to lower your risk by contraception. You can try to further lower the risk by several types of contraception for the woman. Then maybe say to the boyfriend or the husband, okay, no, you put something on too. And then there's the other issue, which triggers another constitutional thing, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, the right to self-defense. And that's where another important thing is in terms of our country that the left is trying to get rid of, and that's the right to bear arms. And that is,
yeah, that's not true.
Females tend to be smaller and weaker than males. And when women don't have the right to bear arms, guess who gets the short end of that stick? Guess who gets put down for all of those years when we didn't have the right to vote, when we were downtrodden? And in so many countries, and women, and all of the women that are still getting pummeled by their husbands in this country and throughout the world. But imagine how it would be if each one of those women had a firearm right on them. Then we'll see how many men beat up on them.
So that'll probably be some of next week's discussion. You'll be surprised at how many people might agree with you there, Tenny. So did anyone want to respond to the bodily autonomy
Wait a minute.
bit there?
Hold on. So when we want to say that women to help with their bodily autonomy, these same leftists, we want to abort a kid. How about, if you want to be so sure that you have your bodily autonomy, how about you pack some heat instead of killing an unborn baby? Have a firearm or have a taser on you, or have some mace or something else.
So you're saying we can shoot fetuses?
I'm sorry?
You're saying we can shoot fetuses?
No, I said that you can shoot a rapist if you think somebody's about to rape you. So that's what I'm saying, self-defense. So I'm just saying, women, I'm all about females being empowered, but I'm not about females killing their unborn babies, because they have a right to life too. They have a right to experience all that we are experiencing, because see, that is the hypocrisy. All of us, we are experiencing life. None of us have committed suicide because we're here. And we all get to enjoy the fact that our mothers didn't abort us. And so how lucky we are. It's like all the white people that were so lucky that they weren't born black back during slave times. And it's like, oh, they're so lucky. But think about all those black people that weren't so lucky. How did
And think about all those women you're taking those rights away from.
No, I'm not taking anybody's rights away. I'm trying to give rights to everybody. It is y'all. Y'all are the ones that are trying to create subhumans that don't matter. I mean, it's like,
I know upholding a woman's right to her own body is so creating a subhuman. I feel so bad about that. It's just ridiculous.
to define people out of their humanity. I mean, Hitler was calling the Jews vermin. I mean,
And you're calling women who have abortions murderers. What's the point?
no, I am saying, and what I am saying is, you got to stop the killing. People have a right to life.
Well, except
Stop-
under your theology, abortion doesn't
No, I'm not
remove the right to life.
theology. Stop the killing. Stop the killing. It is inhumane. Look at what these people are doing. These babies are being dismembered.
Well, no, but the question is what right to life does, how is an abortion under the Christian religion taking away a right to life when the baby goes to heaven? It's not removing the right to life of the baby, it's just removing the right to the uterus. I mean, the baby will just have to settle for life in heaven, right?
This is sick. And there will be a day we talk about the Germans in Nazi Germany that stood by and did nothing. We talk about that. We talk about the white people
Hey,
that
these are false equivalents.
and did
That's
nothing.
okay.
And here we are. And because we do not see them, we pay no attention. Because we don't see them. But they're still there. And they're still being robbed of their opportunity. They're still being robbed.
Well, except under your theology, they aren't.
No, I'm not bringing theology. I am bringing in humanity. And when at the Nuremberg trials,
Yeah, well,
When-
that's why I said Christians don't actually believe in heaven and hell when they start talking about abortion.
at the Nuremberg trials, when it was all about, oh, well, our society said that it was okay to treat Jews,
Right, and you're saying it's okay to treat women the same way.
to kill them because they didn't matter. They weren't persons.
Right, and you're saying women aren't persons because they don't have the right to their own body.
Hey, what about all those women that are being killed in the womb?
Well, what about all those women that are dying in childbirth?
They're not dying in childbirth in America. They're dying in
So it's okay. So it's okay if they die in childbirth somewhere else, but
They are dying in the womb because abortionists are killing them. And
Okay,
the-
so I'm gonna step in at this point, Teddy. I want to apologize because I feel like you were making a closing argument. I wasn't trying to interrupt you for that, but I appreciate your passion. Probably more than most of the listeners. I would have made a similar argument myself once upon a time. So I do want to give you, say, another couple of minutes, although I think you've made your argument, of uninterrupted time, and we'll move to Andrew for a closing argument, and then Darren. So go ahead, Teddy. Take 2 more minutes to finish how you want.
I don't think there's anything more to say than that.
Okay, Andrew.
Okay. Just 3 or 4 points here. women gained the right to vote, not through bearing arms. Maybe there's another point in there. I don't know. But whatever this loose coupling of the Second Amendment and women's right to vote was, I don't get it. Sorry if I missed it, Teddy. Maybe it was clearer than that. But women didn't gain the right to vote in this country through carrying firearms. Do I think that women have the right to protect themselves from rapists? Absolutely, I do. I think that it is. I think that it is somewhat reprehensible that we live in a society where rapists carry guns, and we have to carry guns to protect ourselves when we do. But for those interested in this gun debate, by the way, there will be a gun debate over on Proscenium on May 4th. So head over there and listen in. But in terms of violent crime in the United States, crime that involves those murder machines called guns, citizens who also have guns stop 3%. 3% of gun crime is stopped by citizens with guns. The answer to keeping women safe is not more guns. In the United States, we have 125% weapons to population. There are more guns in the United States than there are people. And 2020 was the year where we bought the most guns in history. If that was going to solve our problem, folks, we didn't come close. And I encourage you to check the Gun Violence Archive. Just Google Gun Violence Archive. We have mass shootings in this country multiple times a day. Okay. But what does that do? What does that do in regard to bodily autonomy? I actually think, like Darren, that bodily autonomy is inviolate. So a woman doesn't give up her bodily autonomy when she becomes pregnant. Clinton talked about full moral status and when a fetus achieves it. But here's what I will tell you. It is a special trick of the mind to find that conception means that all of a sudden the woman loses hers. My rights end where yours begin and vice versa, and there is no special circumstance. Zero, none, in which I can take your bodily autonomy, in which I can use your body without your permission, and the same is true in reverse. And as awful as it is, yes, that applies to conception. And because I've tried to give some resources throughout this show, I'll give one more. And this is my final point. Before we legalized abortion in the United States, there were Lysol abortions. Google Lysol abortions. We have, at this time in history, right now, at this moment, we have the choice whether to stay the course and leave a woman with her inviolate right to her own autonomy, or to return women to the days of Lysol abortions. I am in favor of life. I am not abortion happy. But we should never return to the days of Lysol abortions. And the only way to avoid it, is twofold. The woman's right to her own bodily autonomy and not forcing abortions back underground.
Darren.
Well, first I'd like to say that Teddy did a great job. She's there's 3 guys and just her. And she's obviously very passionate about this, and I actually appreciate that, even though it sounds like I'm just being an asshole to her. And the reality is that abortion really isn't a very emotional thing. The anti-abortion folk think that fetuses are babies, and the pro-choice, whether they think the fetus is a baby or not, they feel that no one, not even a fetus, has the right to control the woman's body against her will. And that really is the crux between the difference between where the 2 sides land. And although I appreciate the emotional argument, it just doesn't land for me. And it doesn't land for me because I understand how the biology works. When abortions, 99% of abortions are under 20 weeks, 22 weeks, something like that. So I mean, that's when we're talking about abortion, that's really what we're talking about, is that under 22 weeks, because 99% of abortions, that's where it happens. A fetus does not have the capacity to love, to have emotions, to have experiences. We don't know exactly when it starts having that capacity, but we know that the bottom limit for that is 36 weeks. That means 99% of abortions are happening before the fetus is even capable of having feelings and emotions, a life, perceptions, any sort of qualia. But we also know that it doesn't start at 36 weeks. That's just the very minimum where they could start having consciousness and real life experiences. And when people start talking about babies, they're thinking of that cute little thing that they hold that has these experiences and emotions and ability to experience life. And that's where the real disconnect comes in, because people assume that when they're talking about babies under that 36 weeks, when the fetus is actually able to have those experiences, that they're talking about an actual baby that is capable of having those experiences. And that's where our emotions get so riled up. And I understand it. I really do. If I thought that that fetuses had the same emotions, I mean, the personal autonomy argument is really strong for me, but I would question it a lot more if those fetuses had those or were capable of those emotions, but they're not. And we know for a fact it's not even something that's disputed in the medical field. It just isn't. 36 weeks is the absolute very minimum that anything like that could happen. And we're talking about abortions, which 99% of them are under 20 weeks. So what we're asked to compare are a fetus that has no internal life, that has no emotions, to a full-grown person that does have that internal life, that has those emotions, that has that qualia. And we're being asked by the anti-abortionist people to put the needs of something that has no qualia, that has no life, no inner subjectivity, over the actual person that does have that. Now, I know for a lot of the anti-abortion that won't matter, because they want to have, because in their mind, the baby is a baby is a baby. And I get that. I really do. But if you are going to have a significant conversation with the anti-abortion, with the pro-abortionists, you're going to have to take the biology into consideration, and you're going to have to change your arguments, because the ones that the anti-abortionists have been using don't work. They don't even work with Christians. So that's my advice to anyone who's listening to this that actually wants to have a conversation about this with the other side is, you really, if you really want to convince the pro-abortion that abortion is wrong, that disparity between the cognitive capacity of the fetus and the mother is going to have to be overcome somehow, because you will never ever convince people off of just an emotional argument. So that's my advice, for what it's worth.
Okay.
And David, given
Yes.
the importance of the topic, I mean, this isn't just any topic. In the law, the prosecution, the people that have the burden of proof, not that I have the burden of proof, but you know, they get the first and the last statement. And well, I didn't have the first statement, the opening, but there were some important things that kind of got brought up in terms of the Lysol abortions. I'd like to just respond, and if y'all want to respond back, I mean, it's some important stuff, and these are not trivial matters. I'd like to respond to that.
Yeah, I would love to, but I think that this is
I'm
this
okay with it,
is
since I was interrupting her during her closing. I didn't realize it was her closing.
It won't take long.
okay. But your statement here, very brief, will go unresponded to.
Okay.
So that's the deal.
Just in terms, like with the Lysol abortions or just back alley abortions, I don't like the idea of anybody who feels so desperate. I mean, because again, I was a female that certainly did not want to get pregnant at a time that I didn't want to get pregnant. So I understand that, but I also made sure that I didn't. And at certain points in my life, I absolutely made sure, I mean, that I wasn't going to be getting pregnant. Took no risk, and so, but I can appreciate the desperation, and that is sad. But you cannot say that we have to allow the killing of an innocent person, an innocent human being, in order to not allow a person to experience risk when they're trying to take somebody else's life. That's like saying that during slave times, oh, we wouldn't want it to ever be risky for slave owners to own slaves. It's got to be safe to own slaves, so we wouldn't want slaves to by any chance have any weapons. God forbid, because if those slaves had weapons, well, I guess those slave owners would probably get what's coming to them. In terms of, Aaron keeps talking about biology. Let's get back to biology. Well, again, biology, fertilization is when life is created, and that is one area where we all have that common ground. That is what, and again, I'm trying to talk with the atheists. I'm trying to bring a common ground to people, because I'm not just going to be talking to people who believe in God. An objective an objective starting point is fertilization when life begins. And that is something that we all share, something where there's that inclusion, where we're not excluding people by how smart they are. It's not eugenics. It's not, oh, this person can think more. This person is bigger. This person has greater capabilities. It's inclusion. And so, and then we talk about in terms of just the special relationship between a mother and a child. It's not just, do we have a duty to help everybody? I mean, it's good for us to try to help as many people as we can, but a mother and her child, that's not just anybody, that is child, and there is a special duty, whether a person feels it or not. I mean, even the law says, I mean, if the child were a newborn, does a newborn have a greater thought process than, 2 minutes from the time they're out of the womb? Is their thinking really that different? Yet you can't just abandon them. You can't just kill them. You can't chop off their head at that point. So what's the big difference? Is their value changed so much at that point? It hasn't. It's a human. And so, we need to think about that. And when we talk about inclusion, we need to put our money where our mouth is and not just say all these cute little talking points and pat ourselves on the back. Let's put our money where our mouth is.
Okay. So, all right. I wasn't actually going to make a statement, but I guess I will make a small one, just to say that, some members of the audience will be very uncomfortable with this kind of conversation. I'm uncomfortable with this kind of conversation. This is the one and only time we'll devote time to this subject. So that's one of the reasons I let it go as long and try to stay out of it as much as possible, keep things moving. This is an emotional argument, and we can talk about science, and we can talk about the statistics. We can talk about the various facts, but none of that is going to ever make this not a highly charged emotional argument. And I think that society spends maybe a little bit too much time not having this discussion and not living with some uncomfortableness. And I think that sometimes this is the only way to have the discussion, is to discuss it with our full humanity and not just with our neurons. So I can appreciate that. And so for those listening for the first time, this is not our typical show, but it's definitely an acceptable show. So next week we'll talk more about killing. I bet that there's some emotion there too. This is an emotional series. We're going to talk about suicide. We're going to talk about euthanasia. We're going to talk about war and self-defense. And I suspect it's not going to break down in an atheist Christian kind of way. These are very complicated topics, and sometimes you just have to allow yourself to speak about these things and think about these things with your entire humanity without suppressing any one part of it. And so I will say about the abortion discussion, I appreciate all of the participants. I didn't realize that we were going to lose one of the Christian hosts. Originally, the moderators would not have been a part of the discussion per se, but things don't always work out as planned, and we didn't have one of our hosts there, and he graciously stepped in at the last minute when Russell couldn't be here, and I know that he would have wanted to be here for this too. So I just want to thank everybody for that, and I will add my 2 cents here at the end, as I did at the beginning, which is to say, I hate abortion. I hated abortion when I was a Christian, probably for different reasons than a lot of people think, but I hate abortion today. And even though I don't think that Teddy is always the most, um, her arguments are not always the most cerebral, and I don't always connect with her. I actually connect more with Teddy today. So sorry, other participants. Emotionally speaking, Teddy speaks my language. That this is when I'm not wearing the hat of a provocateur, I feel this way a lot on the subject of abortion, and it makes me nauseated to have to defend it. But that's where the cerebral part comes in. That's where the other part of my humanity comes in.
I've got to
I
and say something, David, and this is important. For the people who say, I don't support abortion, but I support somebody's right to have an abortion, that is the equivalent of, I would never own a slave.
Teddy, I've never muted anyone on the show, so I'm going to ask you to self-regulate.
Yeah. About life.
So I appreciate that position. In fact, I have held that position, so I understand it.
You should still hold it.
I'm going to ask you one more time to self-regulate.
Self-regulate.
So I want to end this with a piece of music that I wrote as a Christian that expressed my thoughts on the subject. And it was one of the last pieces of music I ever wrote and performed and produced. At the time, I believed that I did not have very long to live. That was almost true. And it was one of the last things I was going to do with myself. And so, having spent some time in my life as a musician, I wanted to say something worthwhile. And I'm going to share that now because, frankly, it still expresses the emotion of how I feel, even if it doesn't express the theology of how I feel. So I'm going to share that with you, and then we will close out with that. So I'm going to hit a couple of buttons, and I hope this works. It worked in practice. So here we go.
Oh, Father, please tell me what choices you faced when breathing your life into me. For I'm the vessel in which I was thoughtfully placed to the person you designed me to be. Did you think about all of the pain I'd endure? Were my trials ordained from the start? Was there ever a moment when you were unsure? Was there ever a doubt in your heart? Well, I choose this moment to lift up my voice and thank you for making this choice. Life is a beautiful thing to me, in spite of its hardship and strife. There is nothing and no one I'd rather be. So thank you for choosing my life. Life is a beautiful thing to me, in spite of its hardship and strife. There is nothing and no one I'd rather be. So thank you for choosing my life. Ooh, Mother, you carried my once helpless form for the better part of a long year. Did I bring you blue skies, or did I bring you a storm? Did I bring you a smile or a tear? Was I ever truly a part of your plan, or just an unpleasant surprise? Well, regardless, you made the hard choice that now stands before you with tears in his eyes. Well, I choose this moment to lift up my voice and thank you for making this choice. Life is a beautiful thing to me, in spite of its hardship and strife. There is nothing and no one I'd rather be. So thank you for choosing my life. Life is a beautiful thing to me, in spite of its hardship and strife. There is nothing and no one I'd rather be. So thank you for choosing my life. Life is a beautiful thing to me, in spite of its hardship and strife. There is nothing and no one I'd rather be. So thank you for choosing my life. Thank you, Lord. Life is a beautiful thing to me, in spite of its hardship and strife. Nothing. There is nothing and no one I'd rather be. So thank you for choosing my life. What a beautiful choice. Is a beautiful life to